Okay, check one, two. Check one, two. What's up, Addy? Please let me know how the sound is, other than my horrible voice tonight. I am sick with a cold of some kind or flu. I don't know what it is. I got it at Mindfest, and so somebody there spread something, and I think I know who it was. But if you were there, then you can probably know who it was. But definitely still worth going. No regrets, no regrets, as they say. It was a blast. I'm going to talk about um, last week why I could not stream. I was actually not here. I was at the Polymath Medical Conference at Florida Atlantic University and at Mindfest at Florida Atlantic University. I have included a bunch of links down below, and uh, you can check them out. But we're going to talk about them tonight. It was an incredible trip. I feel off my game because I'm sick, and I was so excited for the stream to talk about so much. And I'm not nearly as organized as I was hoping, but hopefully it's still a good time. It's going to be a bit informal. Let me see if I can get this to stop doing what it was doing. It keeps like uh, focusing. I'm trying to make it stop. But so uh, yeah, that's why I was not here last week, and I didn't want to miss 2 weeks of streaming. So you have to put up with my terrible voice. Hopefully, I'm not clearing it too much. But please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm and helps boost this channel. I really appreciate it. Comment in the live chat below if or on the side. I don't know where it is. It's on the side. If you are watching this live, if you have any questions, it's going to be kind of an informal one. I'm going to talk about some of the things that I saw at Polymath Medical Conference and at Mindfest. I linked to a bunch of channels, and we'll go over some of them uh, throughout the stream. But man, and I do have some water, so I'll probably try and stick to clearing my throat when I'm showing some clip or something, but we'll see. Um, and then yeah, I can also just take some questions. I might show some work that I've been working on, and we'll see. But like I said, I was hoping to be a bit more organized, but I still think it'll be a great stream. All right, so uh, we we are Jewish. We sound nasally always. Yeah, but this is pretty bad. um, we know who it was. Yes, we know who it was, Addy. Um, and Quest. I am some Everclear inward. It's Everclear. Is that the alcohol? That's like rubbing alcohol, basically. But all right. So I did a stream. Apparently, well, for some background, there is a uh, conference that's held every year for the past few years, put on by Susan Schneider, called Mindfest, and it is at Florida Atlantic University in uh, Boca. Yeah, I don't know if it's Boca Raton or Raton. It was like a huge debate. I'm not from there, so I don't know. But it's from Boca. It's in Boca, and I'd never been there. Beautiful place, but I went and did a stream a few weeks ago on here. Apparently, this is what I think happened. What I was told. Um, where is it? Yeah. On William Hahn's discussion with Curt Jaimungal, and it was a really good stream. I really liked their talk, and enough to do a video about it, and then which I highly recommend checking out. I probably should have linked that below, but I will after. But you can see it here. It was about a month ago, and then apparently some of the people at Florida Atlantic University, including William Hahn, saw the video and liked it, and got invited to their Polymath medical conference that they were putting on, and to Mindfest, which is they were consecutive days. And I've also always wanted to go to Mindfest for the past couple years, and I never expected to be invited. So that was very cool, and really grateful to everybody who I met. I don't know who would want to be named and who doesn't, but we'll talk about the people who are at least publicly, listed as being part of the event, because I don't want to out anybody who's not public person. But just know that just even if I don't say your name, I appreciate that whole experience. It was awesome. Everybody I met was very cool, and it was people who are having the same discussions on the same topics, many of whom we've discussed their work on my channel. We'll go over some of it. And it was quite an experience. It was very cool. So, all right. Without further ado, let's talk about the first day, which was Polymath Medical conference, and Polymath was lit. It was definitely very lit. Atlanta Illuminati HQ. Maybe eventually. A lot of meeting of the minds going on, but this Polymath Medical conference was a panel discussion, which William Hahn was part of, and others. I linked to the event below, and it was at the Gruber AI Sandbox at Florida Atlantic University, and it was a panel discussion afterward. It was a presentation by Michael Levin, who we've talked about a lot, and it was probably my favorite discussion my favorite lecture that I've seen him do. It wasn't really a talk that he did; he just kind of gave a lecture on his work, and then afterwards he took questions, and then after that there was a panel discussion where a bunch of people in the medical field were invited to talk with mainly professors of AI, and it was hosted by Curt Jaimungal, or moderated by Curt Jaimungal, and it was put on by Addy, who is in the chat right now. I've linked to his channel below. It's I don't want to mispronounce it, Ekkolápto, and he puts on a bunch of events and in topics that we discuss, and it was a very good event. It was, like I said, it was my favorite lecture that I've heard by Michael Levin so far, and it was amazing to see a bunch of people in the medical community, in the medical field, doctors in all different types who showed up. Some of them showed up out of fear of their job being lost to artificial intelligence. Some of them showed up wanting to spread the word on how to use large language models and other AI tools to help streamline and optimize their workflow at their jobs. And it was it was good to just see a lot of people engaging actively on the subject of AI in its actual impact that's in a specific field, which, I mean, healthcare is a huge field, but is it really one field? I don't know, but maybe. It depends on how your perspective on it, but it's definitely a field that holds some of the most world-changing impactfulness when things go well and when things do not. So I think it's a very, very important subject to discuss the impacts of AI on, and we got a whole range of things. I learned a lot, I will say, from a lot of the professors there that I spoke with about AI. It was good to speak with, like I said, this is going to kind of be informal, but I'll probably get a better flow in doing that. But it was good to speak with a lot of people in academia who were willing to engage with some people outside of academia, and also the public in general, but researchers who are not within academia on these subjects, I would say, is what I meant earlier, like me. I really appreciate being invited to that. I don't have a PhD in computer science or physics or anything like that, but not even philosophy. But it's just good to be a part of some of the more private discussions as well, not just commenting on people's public lectures and discussions, because it's much it's a much better in place in to work out the differences in communication, because it's much easier. One of the things I found was that it's sometimes easier to speak on here about my views on certain things, because the assumption is that you understand the context of what I'm saying already. If you subscribe to this channel, if you don't, please do, then you'll know the context. But and then if I need to explain the context, then usually I know how to just explain it. But when it comes up in conversation, the context it ends up becoming much more personal to each person, and you have to try and explain what you're trying to say while using terms that you may think are not ideal, or that you're not aware of, and they're using them, but you don't understand the meaning of them. It really highlighted some things for me that was good to know. But it also I was great to see so many open-minded but also rigorous academics who were really trying to push into new science, into new directions. I have a spoon and a bottle of honey on the side of my desk that you can't see, because I might have to do that at some point so that my voice doesn't sound so bad. It does seem to help. Like, that's one of the things that I will say, that when we're speaking about medical care, that nobody seems to say that much anymore, is that if you have a sore throat, take a spoonful of honey. I don't know how much it matters if it's raw or not. I know people say that. I haven't looked enough into it, so I can't comment. But it does help if you have a sore throat. It's probably better than any cough drop that I've tried, even though they sometimes work. But sometimes you got to think about the past with medical care and adopt it. But then sometimes you also got to look to the future, which is what this event was about. And so let's look at this. This is right here. If you're not subscribed to my Substack, then I highly recommend it. But I'm trying to post there more. But this is a clip from that Curt Jaimungal put up of the talk that Michael Levin did. You have to subscribe to his Substack to watch it. I definitely recommend subscribing to his Substack. The link is below to this, by the way, and that's where you can watch this full discussion. I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm going to show some clips and just show you how amazing this talk was and how incredible a lot of the research that is being done is. I mean, things that I know that we say things about, like, science fiction, that one day we'll have things that are like in science fiction. But the reality is that a lot of the things that we talk about as being part of sci-fi in the general scope of things, I don't know, warp transportation and fusion power and flying cars, none of this stuff has really manifested. And we've gotten a lot of tech that isn't ever really part of science fiction, because it's kind of too convenient, which is like that you can use your phone to look up any piece of information ever. And now you have literally an essay writer and a songwriter and all these things in your pocket that you didn't have prior. It's not just a calculator and a camera. It's like you can ask your ChatGPT through your phone to write an entire essay for you. I used it this weekend for a party for a family member of mine. We did a joke of, like, if you were going to be president, what would you, make your case? And I made one. It was like a joke, and I made one for my daughter, my 1.5-year-old daughter, of what she would want for, if she ran for president, what's her policies? And I had ChatGPT come up with ideas for me, and then I used Midjourney to make an image that I could put her face on, and then I cleaned it up in Photoshop, and it was hilarious. And but and like I've said on here before, I've used it to make songs for my job. I've used it to make ads, and make images and make for for this channel, and I've used it to make uh, all kinds of things. I mean, if you're using these programs, you can use them for all kinds of things. But we'll also get into some negatives that I've seen lately. But this talk that they gave was really focused around how can these things start to impact the medical fields. But this is the talk by Michael Levin that's behind. I don't know why I got too sidetracked there, but I'm sick. Sorry, guys. But here's the intro to the talk by Michael Levin that you should watch on Curt Jaimungal's Substack. So.
Computer and draw the anatomy of exactly what you want. If you could convince cells to build whatever you wanted them to build, birth defects, traumatic injury, cancer, aging, degenerative disease, all of these things would go away. We are literally reading out the electrical memories.
What if the most important intelligence isn't in your brain at all, but is instead encoded in the electrical conversations happening between trillions of cells? At Tufts University, Dr. Michael Levin tells us about the future of medicine by revolutionizing our understanding of biology. How so? He decodes these bioelectric signals, the recently discovered language that tells cells what shape to build, how to repair damage, and even when to become cancerous. This talk was put on by Addy from Ekkolápto, Professor William Hahn from Florida Atlantic University, and academic philanthropist Ruben Gruber, all of whom are attempting to create a theory of everything for biology and medicine by open sourcing science through research hackathons and salons, both in person and online. The link to their events is on screen and in the description. In fact, I was there at this event and their previous Polymath event. A link to my presentation is on screen. A link to my interview with William Hahn is on screen as well. And more from this event is coming up. Ekkolápto's founder, Addy aims to enhance the capability of the mind and body to better understand the world around you. My name is Curt Jaimungal, and on this channel we explore theories of everything, primarily from a theoretical physics lens, but also we explore philosophy, math in general, and consciousness. It's a peregrination in these bioelectric...
Okay, so I remembered what I was getting at, but that's just the intro. I actually remember some clips that I do want to show you from that talk because they are incredible. But you should definitely. I'm not going to show too much of it. You should definitely go watch it on his Substack. I've done multiple discussions, multiple commentaries on Michael Levin's discussions with Curt and others, and I would love to have him on the channel at some point, or there are some things that are in my work that are particularly relevant to some of the work that he's doing on like planaria and things like that. It was amazing though to see his research, and I'll show some of it. But this is what I meant, is that it is some science fiction stuff, guys. It is about as close, I think, that we'll ever get to curing cancer is what his research will produce. And not just that, he is regrowing the limbs of frogs in the lab. This is not something that is normal for frogs. This is something that is about as normal for frogs as it is for you and me, which obviously has extraordinary medical implications for people. And I'm pretty sure they will be starting mammal trials soon, which I would imagine would be mice. And then what comes after mammal trials with mice is probably, I would imagine, humans. Maybe they still will use macaques or something. I don't know how much they are still using other animals besides mice in medical testing or like that. But it is... I honestly think that we will be regrowing limbs within 10 years. Like if you lose your arm, I think that they will be able to regrow it. It doesn't mean it will be perfect, but it will be probably pretty functional and pretty good looking. And it's so fascinating because what this opens up is not just to treat people who have lost a limb going forward, but also people who have lost limbs in the past. And is that you could potentially reopen, if you lost your hand and you had nothing here, just like a nub or something like that, like they could probably reopen it and do the therapy that they plan on doing, and it would probably regrow your hand. I do believe that, just looking at it from the lens of sentient singularity theory and seeing what the mechanism for how he's triggering this, I think that they will be able to do this. And I don't even think it will be very expensive in a short period of time. At first, it will be ridiculously expensive, like everything. But now, cell phones used to be for Wall Street hedge fund managers, and now they are for everyone. Like, there are homeless people who have cell phones. I don't know how many of them, but probably a lot. Definitely a lot. I don't know if it's the majority, but it's a lot. You go to the poorest countries in the world, some of them now, and some of there, it's not uncommon to see people with a cell phone. And it's science fiction stuff, guys. But here's him kind of going over it. But I'm glad that Curt had the kind of background on everybody in the intro there, because I'm trying to limit how much I say, which I don't know how good of a job I'm gonna do with that. It's funny, like, I've had to stop myself from speaking all day, and I talk a lot, guys. Sometimes, and you know that more than anyone. If you're watching this channel, then there's nobody who knows that better. I don't even know if my family knows as well as you guys know that I can talk a lot. But and they know, but they don't watch the channel either. But it's just some absolutely incredible work, and it needs to be highlighted in salons like this, and events and conferences where we can actually start to look at people's work who are doing experimental experiments that are repeatable and rigorous and have certain implications about the definitions of intelligence, and especially now. I mean, even this work with cells in your body has huge implications on how we think about intelligence in AI. And, what Michael Levin has done with his work is he has tapped into the intelligence of cells, not appearance of intelligence, like true intelligence, like you and me. And that doesn't mean as intelligent, and it doesn't mean that they can abstract the way that we can. That's not something seems to be something that's pretty unique to humans. But intelligence in so far as navigating their world, like a dog or a fish or a fly, something like that, probably not that much higher than a cell. I do think it is higher, but not that much higher. And to illustrate this point, well, here, I'll show you a clip from the actual event really quick. Where is this? This is a video I took really quickly. Here. That's pretty amazing, though. So it has, what is that, like a LiDAR? That's pretty awesome. It's definitely less messy than my dog's. Sheds less. So, oh man, actually, now I have like all these good ideas, the things that I wanted to talk about that I had forgotten because I've been taking care of myself all day. We'll talk about it. This is the dog that I saw, this robotic dog, when I first walked in to the room, and they were just showing off, the range of movement and the things that it can do. But I was speaking to William Hahn about it, and apparently they are training it to detect smoke, to the smell of smoke. To be a mobile smoke detector. And also they are training it to recognize firearms. I don't know what application that could have, potentially, probably military, would imagine. But they're training it by making watch action movies like The Matrix, which is wild because I mean it just shows that something that I talked about in many years ago when I was talking about AI and about how it needed a hierarchy of truth to reference in its body that is built into its body itself, the body of it itself. And the body, I don't mean it like the body of that dog. And we'll talk about that in a second. I mean its embodiment, which is like the internet, I think. I think a technological sentience or an AGI that's truly self-aware will basically be the internet one day. Oh, just that wakes up. Talking about the details of the birth of that being another time, but I talked about how it needs a hierarchy of truth, essentially. And what this means is that, and the reason why I said this is in the video, I think it's called, oh man, you can look at it. It's one of the first few videos that I uploaded to this channel, and it's not alive. I think it's, I gotta look it up, like AI and the Science of the Messiah or something like that. And it talks about, and this was a long time ago, was in I had a totally different channel at that time. I just re-uploaded it to this one. But so the language that I use in that is very different than even now. And but what I said in there is that it's not going to know, AI is not going to be able to be generally intelligent until it's able to self-orient. And it won't be able to self-orient if it doesn't know whether or not it's looking at the real world in its, LiDAR or in its computer vision, via its computer vision, or whether or not it is looking at a screen. It's not going to know what's a movie and what's real. You know what's real and versus what's not by whether or not you can sense it and on, with your senses. Does it? And you can use your various senses on, to try and deduce which, whatever it is that truth it is that you're trying to deduce. Like I said before, if I told you that a pot of water was cold and you put your hand in it, it was boiling and it burned you. Now via your senses, you cannot trust what I said. And even if it looked like the water was cold for some reason, I don't know, you used a broken temp gun and you pointed at it and checked the temperature and it said it was 37 degrees Fahrenheit, but you put your hand in there and it burned your hand. You're not going to trust my word anymore. You will think I'm a liar forever. And you're not going to trust that temp gun anymore. You're going to think it's broken, or you're going to know that it doesn't work because your hand was scalded. And that's how you know that that's your hierarchy of truth. AI needs this, or I don't want to say AI, a technological sentience needs this. I don't believe that like ChatGPT is conscious or that it will become conscious. We're going to talk about that later because there was some great talks about it. But it's definitely not sentient. And everybody seems to have different definitions for the term conscious. And that's one of the things that I really saw at this conference is that some people did distinguish between conscious and sentient. And I don't, because I don't think that you can be one without the other. Same thing with intelligent. I don't think that you can be truly intelligent or generally intelligent, which is the same thing as actually intelligent, without sentience. And a lot of people do. I've learned that, but I really saw it here, where a bunch of people had different opinions about these things and could not really come to an agreement on what they meant. And so I've been working on a paper for a while that I've talked to you guys about, and it's coming. But one of the things is that I decided not to use the term consciousness in the paper a while back. And part of the reason is because people have different definitions of it. But what's interesting is that you see this dog, which is obviously, sometimes it was being controlled, but it also has the ability to have some automated systems. That's why it has LiDAR. I was driven to the event, by the way, in a Tesla, an Uber. It was a Tesla, and it has machine vision and is able to see all the different cars around it on the road, and it maps them out, and you can see it mapping it as, in real time as it's driving, because so I think the guy turned on self-driving, but I think it does it even when you're driving. And it's very good. I mean, it is an incredible piece of safety equipment, this autopilot. I like that it's called autopilot. I think that's like a better way of thinking about it than self-driving car. But they have recently introduced like Waymo and into LA and Arizona at least. I think it's coming to Texas. Which is about as close to self-driving as you can get. I mean, it is basically self-driving, but there will always be, I think, certain constraints that you have to work within when it comes to self-driving car. And we can overcome those constraints by adding various systems on top of other systems. You can add LiDAR on top of machine vision, and it will give you a little bit more, information about what is around it. And oh man, being sick sucks. I am such every man is like such a baby when they get sick, but I don't know why that is. I think it's because women can't even afford to stop doing whatever. Like if a woman gets sick, she cannot. It's not like she can be like, oh, I gotta just lay in bed. I'll feed the baby, and in 2 hours I need to take care of myself and rest and nap or something. They can't do that. Baby starts crying, they've got to get up. And especially if whatever they need to offer the kid is not something that someone else can offer, like breastfeeding or something. And so they're just different than us. They can just power through it. We are not so good at it. But trying to get back on track. But I think that in order to be truly able to navigate your environment and be generally intelligent, aka truly intelligent, conscious, sentient, you have to be sentient. And so I think that self-driving cars are going to be restricted to certain things, like, we turn on autopilot on the highway. We use Waymo in the city in specific, location that it has, programmed into it, or that has been determined as an environment that isn't going to confuse the software. And but that's not true of a cell. A cell is actually intelligent and is actually able to navigate its environment because it has a hierarchy of truth. It can feel pain and probably pleasure. I'm sure it probably has all the same physical feeling sensations that we have, almost probably all of them. And it doesn't mean it has the same abstract thoughts, but it probably has all the same basic emotions. And we have some emotions that I think are not felt by beings that are not humans. Like probably regret. That's but like I don't know if that's true, but I do think they feel regret, but it's like in the moment. They're not gonna feel regret probably 2 days later, but they'll feel regret a few seconds after they do what they did, and they regret it. And if you have a dog, then you know this. And when you catch them doing something that they are not supposed to be doing, immediate guilt that, and at least hopefully, I feel like, I don't even know if that's right or not, but probably hopefully, because it means that they understand that they did something that they shouldn't have done. Once, I have 2 dogs, Maya and Noah. Maya is a Belgian Malinois, my dog, and then I have a Cavaliers Poodle mix. That's kind of my wife's dog. And one was originally my dog, one was originally her dog. Now they're both our dogs. And once I walked in, and our dog Noah was standing on top of the table, eating a birthday cake that was not his. It was my wife's. And her family came over for her birthday. We walked them out, and we came back in, and he was standing on top of the table eating a cake. His whole face was in this cake. He's never been on top of the table before in his life. I didn't even know he has ever even thought about it, or if he's ever thought about it. And he also doesn't steal food ever when we're around. We don't have we don't ever give them food either. That we never give them human food. And we walked in. He was absolutely face first deep in that cake. And as soon as he heard the door open, I saw him immediately, but he jumped right down off of the counter and tried to act like he didn't do anything, but his face was entirely covered in cake. And then I was like, pointed to the cake, and I was like, why did you do that? And he just immediately looked so guilty. And he realized that I knew that what he had done, and then he felt guilty. I don't know if he would have felt guilty if I just acted like I had no idea what he was doing. But that's an interesting thing to think about. But that's intelligence. This dog that I showed, this robotic dog, not intelligent no matter how good it gets at navigating its environment. I don't think it will ever be intelligent or conscious or sentient. If the internet wakes up and is a singular Skynet style technological sentience, which is what I think will happen one day, then that dog will probably be like a limb of that being, but not it itself be conscious. And this is what a cell, though, is like. Let me pull this up. This is in They Talk. People think of cells as not being intelligent necessarily. Some people do, but it's not obvious to most people, but that's because most people don't actually look at cells. But if you did look at cells, you could see what they were doing, just as much as you could see what your dog does, you would know. And here you can see this.
You would have to physically interact with the hardware. Here's to understand program on your laptop. So this is what we are made of. We're made of individual cells. So here's this is a free living organism called the Lacrimaria, but it gives you an idea of what individual cells can do. This thing is incredibly competent in its own little sphere of influence here. There's no brain, there's no nervous system. It handles all of its physiological, metabolic, and so on needs all in one cell. And in fact, all of us were a single cell once. And these cells did this amazing process of embryonic development where they became one of these complex organisms, or even perhaps a human. And in fact, even below the single cell level, the molecular pathways within single cells already have learning capacity, right? The different signaling pathways and gene regulatory network components come together into a collective intelligence that is able to form 6 different kinds of memories, including Pavlovian conditioning. You don't need a brain, you don't need neurons, you don't even need the cell. It's just the molecular pathway alone has this capacity, and we are now creating devices that we're using to train these pathways, and then there's many applications like drug conditioning and so on.
Do you see that thing? If that thing was the size of you and it landed in a spaceship on the White House lawn, and this cell stepped out and was, 4 feet tall and was moving around like that,
cells did this amazing process of embryonic.
You would not think twice on whether or not that thing was alive, or a living being or an intelligent being. You would just assume, because it's obvious. And here's the thing: I had this conversation with this guy at Mindfest, and two professors there that study AI, and we were talking about like just consciousness and its relationship with machines, and one of them said to me that he didn't think that cells were conscious or sentient. And I'd said that I thought cells were sentient. And he was like, you think that they're, what do you mean by sentient? And I was like, having feelings, like they feel. And he was like, but they're not though. Why would you think that? And my question is, why would you not think that actually? Like, I don't understand how people don't think that, other than it's just kind of convenient to think about it as, to not think about them as sentient in some ways, but it's also limiting because it limits how you approach using or working within cells in the medical environment. And if you understood that that was a medium and that was the actual workspace as fundamentally as you could get within, you know, cellular and above level, you know, mechanisms, I guess, then you understood that they had their own intelligence, or they were intelligent, they were conscious or sentient, they were aware of their world, and they were able to have their own individual goals. And sometimes you now can think about how those goals could be confused. And if they get confused, then they try and live forever and they turn into cancer. And you can realize that. Or you can realize that you don't have to 3D print the shape of a limb to replace the limb of somebody who had one amputated or something like that. If your cells grew the hand that you have, then they clearly are capable of creating that structure again. Because it didn't come from you. You weren't sitting there like manifesting your hands with your own brain or your own mind. As I've said on here before, you are a mind, you have a brain. That's the difference. It wasn't even something that was another thing that just wasn't, there is no clear definition across everybody that was there on what is a mind and what is a brain. There's usually, people use them interchangeably. Even Sarah Walker, who had a talk there a few years ago, who I also really respect her work. She had, in that talk, I remember, this was a year ago. I don't know how I remember this right now, but I guess just that's what happens when you're thinking about this exact same event and this and you know, similar topics. But it's she was talking about just assembly theory, and then she was interchangeably using the word brain and mind, and she realized it, and she just I think somebody maybe even asked her about it, and she straight up said, I'm not sure what the difference is right now. I'm open to them being different, but for now I'm just going to use them interchangeably. And it was good that she clarified that. But I would say you are a mind, you have a brain, and that these cells are little minds, just like you, and they don't have brains. And that tells you everything you need to know about questions about maybe not everything, but questions about where sentience is located. It's not located in your brain. That is at least clear. And but if you know that cells can have their own, you know, goals and things like that, then you can harness that and utilize it to regrow people's limbs and to cure cancer. And that's what Michael Levin's doing. I mean, guys, I am pretty amazed at that one. I did not think that we would actually see that. I thought that they were going to be 3D printing organs, and they would have to take cells that were stem cells and or cells that were specifically a certain type of cell that was specific to an organ that you're trying to print that is not a complex organ, that's fairly homogeneous in its cellular, I guess, variability. But most organs are not like that, and the ones that are can usually be just replaced with hardware. Even now, like there's valves and things like that you can put into people's hearts. But the heart itself, you can actually just get an artificial heart, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to be the ideal. Usually the ideal is that people get a heart transplant. But that comes along with all these other issues, like, you know, there's rejection problems whenever you get someone else's limb or somebody else's organ and do some type of transplant. And also, it's just kind of morbid. Like, I would do, I don't want to say I would do whatever I had to in order to survive, but if I had to undergo an organ transplant in order to survive, I would try it. But it is not a pleasant thing, and obviously surgery sucks to recover from and also to have, and it's dangerous, and on top of all of that, you know, you've got this super precious thing that everybody who is it that a lot of people who are in absolute desperate circumstances want, and there's never enough of them. Like, if there's enough hearts to go around for everybody that needs a heart transplant, the world is in major shit, because you should have more people being born ideally than people dying. And if enough people are dying to where anybody who needs a heart transplant can generally get one, that's actually, doesn't seem like that would be an ideal world. But and 3D printing a heart is tough. I mean, they've printed valves, but that's it as far as I know. I don't think that 3D printing an organ is actually that feasible anymore like I used to, because I used to think that these things were just, they weren't these complex beings cells. I didn't think of them like that. I mean, even I did know that because I've just studied nature enough throughout my life to know that, but I didn't think about it like that. And I definitely thought, though, that you'd have to like 3D print a new arm out of stem cells or something. I didn't think that you could just put some cream on it and obviously very, very much exaggerating this a bit, but not that much, and then have it regrow. I'll show you this in a second. But you need, in order for that to happen, you need to find a way to communicate with the cells of someone else's body, and so that they recognize that this task is the task to do, and they can do it. And that is an incredible paradigm shift. It really is. I mean, you go from, we need to come up with all of these different technologies and fuse them so perfectly, and we don't even know if it's going to work. You know, 3D printing heart is, now we've got stem cell, you know, stuff going on, and laws regarding that, and 3D printer technology. And if you've looked at a 3D printed object, there's some of them that are amazing. I mean, many of them are amazing, but there's always little problems. And the thing is, nobody's organs are perfect. You know, one finger is longer than, you know, another, or, you know, one eye is more like squinty than another, or something like that. Your nose goes this way. This is true for everybody, but 3D printers, there's so much super complex little structures within our organs that we don't even get full picture. We can't even get a full picture of, I don't think. Some of them we can, and I don't know how you 3D print those in a way that really would replicate what the structure is. And then also all the complexity and variability in the cells of something like a heart or a liver. It would be tough. You could do some things. I've seen some of the experiments look promising, but if you can just regrow a limb or an organ by telling the cells to do it, your own cells to do it on their own, it takes something from, it makes something that's it seems so incredibly difficult and complex that it might be 50 to 100 years out, and it makes it like 5 years out. Like, if they really wanted to, and they were just like, guys, no legal ramifications whatsoever, go for broke, let's see if we can regrow a human hand of somebody who's had one amputated next year, I bet you they could do it. I'm not saying they should do it. I'm just saying they probably could. That's not true of 3D printing a hand, obviously. They could not do that next year. They could. I don't even think they'll be able to do that in 20 years. You know, if they could do it, it seems like it would be 50 years out or more. I remember Michio Kaku talked about this on like 2050 or something. He had you know, some Discovery Channel special, like the world in 50 years or something. Guys, it's 2030 almost. Like, we're really close to that. And, you know, I don't think we'll be able to 3D print organs even in 2030 that are really functional, like complex organs. But I do think we will be able to just completely regrow them, which is an incredible thing. And it only happens because you looked at the substrate of cells, and you assumed intelligence, agency, consciousness, goals, like competence in achieving goals on their own. And everything about our lives and our experience and our observations of every living, every multicellular organism that exists suggests that cells are able to be self-directed. This is not dictated by your brain, because there's no brain in a cell, and even if there was, is your brain telling the cell what to do? Or it does this idea that intelligence is due to a brain, comes from a brain, or consciousness comes from your brain, is kind of insane when you think about it. Because you look at, the reason why people believe this is because brain injuries impact people, and the brain structure impacts people's abilities, but it doesn't impact your, it can impact your consciousness, but it's not that it, nothing that we've seen actually displays the concept of the brain as in a jar as being legitimate. It's funny, there was a guy at Mindfest the next day, and there was a transhumanism panel discussion, and they were I'd say, like, one of the guys on there was really, really, really far off on his understanding of intelligence and consciousness in general, and compared to like Michael Levin and the AI, some of the AI professors who were on this panel at the Polymath Medical Conference, I'd say people had a much more accurate understanding, many of them, of the nature of cells and the nature of intelligence and the nature of agency and consciousness to some degree. These are all terms that are tough, but and we'll talk. I had a question for William Hahn that was about agency while we were there, and I asked him, and so this is actually, I do disagree with him again. Hats off to him, because I feel like I disagreed with him on a lot of things, even though there's a lot of things I did agree with him on in that talk that I gave my commentary on. I feel like there was also some things I disagreed with him on, and they still invited me, so I appreciate it. I know it wasn't just him, but he was willing to speak with me, and it was, I always appreciate people who don't, who are open to just hearing somebody be critical of their ideas. It doesn't mean I'm right. Be critical right back. That's fine. But I'll be critical of this idea in a second. But he said the world will be filled with AI agents, and I was like, what is an AI agent? Like, where is it? And somebody was like, yeah, is ChatGPT an agent, or is your ChatGPT, on your phone, an agent? And he said it was the best definition he thought was, every time you give it a new prompt, it creates a new agent. And here's the thing that I will say about that. You could define agency like that. And if you do, there's two different ways you could define agency. You could define it as that, as with one that explains that, where it's like every new prompt is a new agent, which is basically like a string of information processing. And or you could define agency as kind of what I think that we normally have always assumed and used the term for, which is when I say you have your own agency. And does ChatGPT have its own agency? A lot of people do think that it does, but I don't think that William Hahn thinks that it does, or wouldn't have thought that maybe, I don't know, exactly what he thinks, but I know that he uses the term agent to define like a new prompt, but I don't think he means it has its own free will essentially, or its own goals really. It's more like I would imagine understands how this thing is built. So if you don't touch it and you don't prompt it, it's not going to do anything. An agent with agency, I feel like, doesn't need you to prompt it or give it a prompt. It's going to come up with its own prompt. And I would say that is the definer of agency, is that does it come up with it? Can you come up with your own prompt? But if you, that's the definition I like. But if like I said, in Sentient Singularity Theory, there's always 2 degrees of freedom. But you could use an agent to mean a new prompt. But if you do that, then it's no longer very applicable to the way that we've used it historically and outside of the context of large language models. And so it kind of overrides all that. And it also kind of makes it seem like it has no meaning anymore. So why can't we just, this is a prompt. This is the results of a prompt. Like, you don't need to describe it as an agent, I don't think. Like, makes the term redundant or not necessarily necessary. And that usually seems to happen with these when we're talking about definitions, and you have this 2 degrees of freedom, and it's like, you could call it this or you could call it this. It's like I've said on here before. Somebody asked me, "Do you believe in the paranormal?" And I knew what they meant by paranormal, but I said, well, by paranormal, do you mean something that does exist but isn't understood, or do you mean something that doesn't exist? And it's like, if paranormal means that which doesn't exist, then we don't need the term paranormal anymore. You could just say, imaginative entities, or which is like the tooth fairy. And but you don't, so it's the same thing happens with agent, I think. But hats off to everybody who's still watching. I know that I don't know, my voice is terrible. My thinking isn't as planned out as I normally like it to be, but I appreciate everybody who is still in the live chat. I'm going to look at the live chat in a second, but my point is that cell, though, that with no brain, that thing, I would call an agent. That's an agent that has its own the ability to come up with its own prompt. And that's different than an AI program that needs to be prompted. And if you can print cells and print an arm, and that's the way that you need to make a new arm, and if somebody needs one, then you basically start everything off as you 3D print basically just the structure of an arm, all as if it's already grown in and done, and then it's printed out of stem cells, and then you have to prompt each cell into becoming the type of cell that you would want it to be. And there's so much more that we don't fully understand, and some of which that we do partially understand, that would be necessary after that I don't even understand enough to get into, but I know that it's there. And because like cells communicating with each other, essentially, your cells have to cooperate. They can't not. I don't think that we could exist the way that we do if it was possible to just 3D print cells and then just prompt them like you can prompt that robotic dog. So you have to communicate with the cells instead of prompting them. It's different than a prompt. Prompt is coding, and communication is an exchange. It's different. So this is, I'm going to show this clip and then one last clip from this, and then we'll move on to talking about some of the conference discussions that were specific. So like I said, I highly recommend watching this whole talk on Curt Jaimungal's Substack. It's linked below, but I'll show you 2 more clips from it.
patterns so that the tissues know what to do, and then they make a correct ring. And the final story that I'm going to tell you is about regeneration, limb regeneration. So adult frogs do not regenerate their legs, unlike salamanders. So if they happen to lose a leg, then 45 days there's basically nothing. So we asked the question: could we communicate with these cells through the bioelectrical interface and guide them towards the leg growing path in anatomical space instead of the scarring path? And so we designed a cocktail, basically a 24-hour application of that cocktail ends up with driving about a year and a half of leg growth. So at that point, immediately within the first 24 hours, you get the pro-regenerative genes coming on here. This is MSX1. You then, by 45 days, you've already got some toes, you've got a toenail, eventually a pretty respectable leg, and it's touch sensitive and it's motile. Okay. So again, keep in mind that in this case, we did not have to manipulate that process during that whole time. We didn't have to talk to the stem cells. There are no scaffolds here. We didn't have to micromanage it at all. We provided a very early signal that said, go down the leg building path. That's it. And so at this point, I have to do a disclosure because David Kaplan and I have a company called Morphoceuticals where we are trying to push this forward to biomedical use, is such that eventually, so now we're trying this in mammals, and so eventually you will have these wearable bioreactors, not just for the limbs, but potentially for all organs that would provide the correct bioelectrical payload in terms of ion channel drugs. So that would then trigger the growth. Not trying to control every aspect of it because you have no idea how to do that, but to provide a trigger stimulus. And the final thing that I want to show you is the ability to induce novel organs, just to kind of nail the idea that what we're doing here is reprogramming the pattern memories of these cells. So I showed you that little.
Notice that he uses the word agential here, agential material. This is what I meant by, like, there's 2 degrees of freedom in language, and like one path, you can choose one or the other and still work as long as you build the rest of the linguistic context around this to make sure that everything is coherent. You can do that, and it works. But there's only one path, though, that gives you new information that's generative. And like I said, if you used agent to mean any new prompt in AI, that kind of eliminates the need for the term, even though it might be totally coherent. You might be able to use it in a manner that's totally coherent. But the thing is that we do need a term that distinguishes between a being and a thing. And that is an inanimate thing and an agential being. And, in Sentient Singularity Theory, in my paper, I go into this. It's like there's beings and things. Agents are beings in my work, which, do you need the term, both of those terms? I don't know. But it certainly seems like it's an agent or agency or agential. It's a very helpful term in allowing us to understand intuitively, even, which I think is very important, what is the nature of the things that we are working with here. When we're saying agential material, what does that mean? It means it is a material that it has a bunch of little holons that make it up that have agency. It doesn't have to be little holons. It just means that the holonic structures, which are the singular structures, the singularities, the sentient singularities, or the material singularities within the structures that you're working with, are sentient singularities. They are agential holonic structures. That's what that means. The same thing. Holon means like a singular structure, like one whole that's sometimes composed of a bunch of smaller holes. Like you are a holon, and so is a cell. So agential holonic structures is basically what we're working with. Then we need terms that have specific intuitive bits of information. Actually spoke to William Hahn about this while I was there. I told him how when I came up with the term sentient singularity theory, I had told some people, does that make sense to you? Like, what do you think that means? And some people were like, it means like one conscious being. I was like, exactly, good. That's what I wanted to hear. And then I had a couple people though that were like, one of them was my dad, and my dad is an intelligent guy, like smart guy, and he was like, I don't know what that means. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know what that means? Like, what do you think that means? And it was so frustrating. And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, are you are you losing it a bit? I don't know what's happening. It doesn't seem like it in any other instance. And then I show you this, and I'm expecting you to just be like, yeah, I mean, it's one conscious being, or one consciousness, essentially. And then I eventually asked him, I was like, what are you getting stuck on? Like, what part of that doesn't make sense? And he was like, and it took me months to ask that question. I couldn't figure out what question I needed to ask in order to get to the bottom of what he was getting thrown off by. And I eventually had an epiphany, and I was like, what? This is the question I need to ask him. And I asked my dad, what is it that doesn't make sense about that term and about the abstract to the paper that's on my website that about sentient singularity theory? And he was like, what do you, it's the word singularity. What's a sentient singularity? And I was like, well, what do you think that means? And he was like black holes and like the Big Bang. And I realized he's thinking the term singularity is like this physics only specific term, because physicists have just dominated the conversation about what is reality for way too long, and they're totally misled. They have confused everyone. And when I was talking to William Hahn about the term consciousness and how nobody has an agreed upon definition. And he was like, yeah, I know. And he's like, and it's funny because he said it used to be a more technical term. And I was like, well, the term singularity in my work on sentient singularity theory is assumed to be a technical term, but I just mean it as its original term. But when some people read it, they think of black holes now, and that, as the singularity is this technical term in physics. And physicists and physics is really the realm of our reality, which is just not true. It's not that physics isn't, it's just that the understanding that our mainstream physicists have of the nature of the material that they're working with, when this physical material is incorrect. And I would say that the nature of the material that we need to be working with in physics is that we need to think about in terms of, if we're going to think about physics much more fundamentally, is agential material. What's the physics of agential materials? That's exactly what Michael Levin is doing, but he's doing it mainly on the cellular level. But he said even that you could do this, it seems like they can do this on the molecular level as well, which is part of the holonic periodicity of sentience in sentient singularity theory. It suggests that there are certain molecules that are minds, that are agents. I'm not saying all of them, maybe all of them, but definitely some of them. You look at some proteins walking around, it looks the same as that single cell organism that we saw. Like little proteins that carry chemicals in between neurons in your brain. It's like that's and across cells and all kinds of things. I mean, it's your body is just an assembly of assemblies of agential holonic structures. Like that's what it is. And I think that's what physics is as well. And it seems like Michael Levin thinks that as well. If he thinks that these molecules that he's trying to, it's in another part of the talk, but I paused it right before he started talking about it on a previous clip. He's going to try and utilize the same assumptions that he has going into the cellular level structures that he is working with when it comes to regrowing cells and regrowing limbs even, and and dealing with and reversing the metastatic nature of certain cells and that have gone cancerous. And this is, I think he'll make enormous strides, actually. I mean, this will be like a different type of chemistry that is wildly much more applicable and much more revealing and intuitive and precise. All these things that we've struggled with doing on the molecular level may end up being just a matter of asking the cells, not the cells, the molecules to do it for us, instead of trying to prompt them into doing it. And the same thing seems to be the case with these cells. It's like when you're putting this substance that he's talking about, when he's got these devices that they are going to try and put on the hands of the nubs of mice at first that have like a limb amputated, and that they rubbed on that frog to cause its leg to grow back, or they injected. I don't know how they did it, but they're asking these cells to communicate and do this. They're not forcing them to do it. They're asking them to do it. And what we've been trying to do in everything from virology to medicine that's on the level of organs, and also medicine that's on the level of cells, is we've been treating all of these structures as if they are not agents themselves that just need to understand what we want them to do and could potentially do it. That's a whole new ballgame. And if you can do that with cells, and it opens up all these degrees of freedom that you didn't even think you had, and then you realize you can do it with molecules, and it opens up all these degrees of freedom that you didn't think that you had. And now we're getting to the atomic level and the hadronic level, and it will probably open up all these degrees of freedom that we didn't think that we had. And, it's funny, this guy asked in this clip that I'm about to show next, hopefully I can find it. Oh, there's me at the front. But this guy asked in the audience, he said, we physicists are searching for a theory of everything in physics. And is there a theory of everything in biology, you think? And what would that look like? And I'm trying to find where it was. It's probably here.
All the time. Why do we have anything but cancer? And it's because of the communication networks that allow
activity in certain parts of the brain.
Drive crazy and
Receive several messages.
people live this. I had a question due to communication.
I don't know exactly where it is. Part of the problem is it's not on YouTube, and so I can't search for the term in transcript. I don't think. Maybe I can. Let's see. Does it have a transcript? No. But basically what he says, and this is the answer, and you can go watch it and hear him say it himself, is he responds and he says, I think that what it will look like is it won't look like the physics that we are expecting, essentially, where it's just a bunch of equations. He's like, he's even said, he's like, I don't know how much that's even expected in physics anymore, but that's definitely the paradigm and the approach that has been taken for, the last 50 to 100 years. And he said, I don't think that that's what it will be in this kind of unified biological theory. He said, I think it's going to be more look like a psychological theory, a theory of mind, essentially, where the structures and the mechanisms that we're talking about aren't mathematical equations. They are goals and senses and things like that. And I think he's completely correct. But I think that that's also the future of us understanding structures even below cells. and multicellular organisms. I think that same thing is going to apply to molecules and to atoms and hadrons, protons and neutrons. Probably not anything below that. That's my prediction. Nothing below protons and neutrons will display agency other than the structure of the universe as a whole. I think is a holonic agent. It is a sentient singularity. But when I got so I don't even know if hopefully this is coherent. But like if you weren't here at the beginning, I have the flu. If you can't hear, but what I was getting at when I was talking to William Hahn, though, also about this like technical term of consciousness is like that's singularity. My dad did not realize like the term singularity. He thought it was like black holes and stuff, and it just meant singular structures that. And then I changed it, and I was like being instead of singularity. I wrote being, and I said I took my abstract and I had replaced all of the term sentient, all of the term singularity with the term being, and so now it said sentient being theory is the theory that the existence itself is a singular sentient being that is replicating and creating additional sentient beings within itself. And I was like, does that make sense? And he was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And this is where just our physics has just led us completely kind of astray. And not that there's something wrong with having a technical term, but when you take a term, and this is why I don't support that using the term agent to apply to a new prompt, because now people are going to be very confused, because sometimes agent is going to mean like you and me, we have an agency. And then sometimes people are going to think, oh, agent, that's an AI term for like a string of, responses from a prompt. And that's exactly what happened with my dad with the term singularity. People assume that when you say a term like that too, I remember a couple people accused me of using the term singularity as like an attempt to sound physicsy. And the opposite is true. Actually, I want us to stop thinking of singularity as a physicsy term and start thinking of it as a term to mean singular, like what it always has meant. And I think that but the biggest issue with all of this stuff is working in the space of language, because we do not have the ideal linguistic context for this. And on my Substack, my last post that I posted like a week ago, or right after I got back from this, actually, I posted a post about, and my Substack is linked below. I think it should be at least. And about how the English language, particularly, is a language that's very good at describing things in their technicalities, but it's not a language that's very good for communication between beings compared to other languages like Romance languages like Spanish, that have gendered grammar to them, or Hebrew that has a genderedness to it as well. But I mean, Spanish, most people in the West know Spanish better. I know Spanish better, but it has a gendered grammar. Luna is feminine. People are like, why is it feminine? And it doesn't really make that much sense that the moon is feminine in just the way that we think of the moon, if you just think of it as a rock. But if you think about how it's related to people and how people have related to it, I'm sure that it makes perfect sense why it is feminine. But I don't really understand completely what that even means, because of the language that I speak is not Spanish. And I don't think that we have the right language in English. I don't think English is an easy language. I don't want to say not the right one, but it's not an easy language to use and to talk about next gen physics and biology and chemistry where we're working within the context of recognizing and leveraging the agential nature of the holonic structures that make up these various levels of matter. And because you want a language that implies hierarchy or relational reactivity and relational nature, kind of like the nature between a man and a woman is like masculine and feminine, and the nature between a king and his subjects is a relationship of hierarchy. And this is what we kind of need in order to instinctually and easily describe agential materials. We don't have that. So it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It means that you have added layers that you have to add onto your descriptions when you're speaking in English about agential materials. But I also think that's part of why we're so good at technology up until now, in the West, is because of English. And it's what has enabled us to build the fastest and best fighter jets and rockets and ships and, all kinds of tech, cars, probably cars. We've made the best cars in the world. The Japanese make really good cars, but, they didn't make the McLaren F1. And that was us. But and I can't even say that was us. I just meant the West, but it was British. It's a British car. But this is our language is the medium that is the that contains the constraints and degrees of freedom of communication, and that is it's also the medium of that contains the constraints and degrees of freedom of abstraction. When I'm thinking about something to myself, sometimes I think about shape and stuff like that, but in order to really dial it in, I basically talk to myself about it. Sometimes out loud, sometimes in my head. Everybody does this. And you're like, what do I need to do? I need to do this, I need to do this, and whatever it is, And if it's an abstract task that you're trying to complete, whether it's retracing your steps about where you lost your keys, or thinking about how you're going to organize your day to where your commute is as efficient as possible, or thinking about, the nature of sentience, it's all going to be done within the language that is natural to you, or and whether that's in your mind, where you're using the terms silently in your own mind, or you are doing it out loud, it doesn't matter. And I think that we're going to see some very interesting things come out of the work that is similar to what Michael Levin is doing, and the work that Michael Levin is doing, any work that anybody else does that's similar. And I think the part of the most interesting implications on it is how is it going to change the language of English a little bit, because we have our language in English is actually not the most conducive language to even political issues. It's not at all. And I will talk more about it in certain streams later on. And I've talked a bit about some of them in here. And if you're a member of our Discord community, which if you'd like to join, find me on Instagram and send me a private message and I will send you the link. Every week we have a live voice call for anybody who wants to join. We talk about anything that anybody wants to talk about. But we talk about on there quite a bit a lot of these topics, and it is clear that like English speaking countries are having political issues, especially English speaking countries, and I think that that's not a coincidence. I think that English is a language that kind of seems to assume or seems to prioritize and focus on the technical structure of things instead of the relational nature of beings. That was pretty good. And the more fundamental substrate of, it appears, according to Michael Levin's work, with cells and also with molecules and also within Sentient Singularity Theory's philosophical context, protons and neutrons and atoms, that actually would require us really understanding that we need a language, or we need linguistic structures that allow us to understand these agential structures intuitively. And I don't know if that's new words that we need in English, or if that's not sufficient because it's just not a gendered hierarchical language the way that Spanish would be or something like that intrinsically. But the same goes for politics. You need, if you don't, and look at the politics of the West, it's so chaotic. Whether you, it doesn't matter what issue, what side of what issue you're on. Like, I hope that you can just recognize, and I think that you definitely do, that the West, when I say Western countries, what does that really mean? It's like mostly English speaking is what I mean. And those countries, like when somebody says the West, it's like, do you immediately think of, Mexico and Honduras? Probably not. And it can't be about like technological development. Those are third world countries or something. Yeah. It's like, I remember watching Blood Diamond, and this guy's like, we need to learn from the third world. And it's like, what level is the third world versus not the third world? People who have, cell phones, or people who, don't have cars, or people that, build their own houses. I don't know. Like, there's no cutoff. And just huge, it's like a proxy. It's like a politically correct way of saying more poor. And materially poor, I guess, or economically poor. And that's not an objective difference. There's no third world country versus not third world country. Like, you go to the center of LA and it looks pretty third world, trust me. Lots of places, in big cities in the United States are starting to look pretty third world, quote unquote. But I think that really we just mean oftentimes English speaking countries, and the countries that most often associated with English speaking countries politically. And because Australia is about as east as Japan, but we don't call Australia the East, call it the West. But if you look at Australia, they have some serious political issues that are very similar to ours in the United States. And same thing goes with the UK right now. And same thing goes with Canada. And I think it's due to our language not allowing for us to intuitively communicate with each other relationships. Like the nature of our various relationships. And I see that everywhere, that if people say, oh, men in the house in a marriage should be the leader or something, and people freak out at that because nobody knows what it means. There's definitely an interpretation of that should make some people freak out, but there's also an interpretation of that shouldn't. And that's wonderful, but it just depends on how you're looking at it. But we don't know because we don't have an intuitively hierarchical and gendered grammar built into our language. And I think that looking at these agential structures and these agential materials is going to require, is going to potentially allow for us to evolve the language of English a little bit in a way, hopefully, that allows us to intuitively navigate agential spaces. This is part of Sentient Singularity Theory's mission, or it's part of my mission with Sentient Singularity Theory. It's not like the original, it's not the goal of it. The goal of it is just to describe the holonic agential structures that make up the cosmos. But and a little bit of the processes involved in them, but mostly the relationships involved. And That's what makes up the process, of an agential material. Is this cell needs to lead that cell. That's what's the dynamic. If there's no leader cell, then there's no way to regrow a hand, and that's something we're gonna have to figure out. But the work of Michael Levin, I hate to say this because everybody says it and I've said it, but it's so true. It's like, if he doesn't get a Nobel Prize, then the Nobel Prize isn't worth anymore. It really isn't. If you asked me before I started this project, if I thought that we would be able to just regrow limbs in 10 years, if you asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. But what we will be able to do in 30, 40 years, maybe, is we'll be able to 3D print, stem cell structures into a limb. And then we can, figure out how to use CRISPR to tell the cells what these stem cells, what cells they need to be. And then we'll sew it back on you. And then it'll work, which I don't think that's actually really possible anymore. And if it is, in certain very small isolated incidents to do something like that, it's going to be within the context of it being incorporated into an agential assembly. And so you would still need to, in order to understand what's really going on, you need to understand it. It's like, I said this last, right before I went on this trip. It's like, I was talking about sleep, and like, everybody talks about sleep as like, what's the purpose of sleep? They say the purpose of sleep very often is, what people say is that it's to allow you to convert short-term memories into long-term memories. Well, how? We don't know, but that's what we think happens, because when you don't sleep, you seem to have trouble with it. Okay. What's the mechanism? We don't know. Okay. Brain scans have not really shown us anything helpful about that, just so you know. Like the neuroscience scientific mainstream has been as lost as physics for the same exact reasons. Is they are assuming inanimacy to the things that they see as obviously being animated around them, and they're definitely not assuming agency, or they are incorrectly assuming agency to the brain when there shouldn't be, and that should not be assumed at all. But it's another like misdirection into just not understanding what agency really is. And so if let's now think about sleep. And I had this epiphany once, and I was like, this is what I think sleep mainly does within the context of sentient singularity theory. Is it allows, it's when you let your cells off from work. Like, that's what it is. You're the king, and you are telling them what they're little army, and you are telling everybody what to do. Like, this is your kingdom, is your body, and your mind is the king. You are the king, not your brain. Your beingness, your someoneness, that's the king. You. And you're telling everybody what to do every time you say, go get a glass of water because my throat is dry. It's because your cells have communicated to you that they need something from you, and you're receiving the message in a sensation to some degree, but you're also feeling it yourself, like, so that, I don't know if that first part was the best way to say it, but yeah, probably. I mean, there is a communication between you and your cells, but there is this superposition of feeling happening. Your cells are feeling things happening, and you're feeling things happening. That's the way to put it. It's not that your cells are sending you the message. Your cells are feeling something, you're feeling something, and you, as the king, go and do. You get to tell your cells what to do. Every time I go to reach for that cup and I want to do it, all my cells in my arm have to get in line and all work together to go get that cup. When you're asleep, they can do what they have to do, not because they're not doing what you want them to do. They can't do both at the same time. Can you even multitask at all? Can you even watch a show and also like write a paper, let alone, your cells take care of themselves and each other while they're doing what you want them to do, which is like probably way more of an intensive of a task than you watching a TV show and, writing a paper about, nonsense for, homework. I don't know. Or let's just say texting someone. I can't even text somebody and watch a show. And nobody can. Like, you just kind of quickly do it, and you either lose the information that you lost by not paying attention to the show, and it wasn't a big enough deal that it matters, or you have to go back. And I'm constantly doing this. And my wife, when we're watching a show, is like, if one of us is multitasking, they are inevitably every few minutes going to be like, wait, go back? Because some word triggered the fact that them and made them realize that they don't know what's going on. They're like, okay, we know we need to go back. It's like your ears are still on your head and hearing sounds while you're texting. So why can't you just listen to what's going on the screen and also write that message to your friend? Because you can't have the structure of and the process of thinking and action to some degree that's like requires focus of any kind intrinsically has a singular goal structure as its north, as the arrow that's pointing to where you want to be. You can't have a compass that has two norths. I don't know if that's the best metaphor, but like that's what I mean is like if you have a goal, then that means you have to have a focus. That focus intrinsically, by definition, is singular in nature. And there's no such thing as multitasking in anything that isn't muscle memory. Like, but when you sleep, so your cells can't multitask like that either. And so neither can you. But you need to let your cells off the hook. They need to go take care of themselves. They need to clean up their space, literally clean up their space, and get rid of waste and whatever is around them. Cells emit waste, guys. Where do you think it goes? I create waste in this house that, you cook and it creates all this stuff that you have to clean and you have to throw away, and it doesn't just disappear. You have to take the garbage out at some point. But if you're always at work, then you can't take the garbage out, And so this is true of cells. And they have to have the chance to go and take care of themselves. Do the things that they need to do on their level, not on your level. Sleep does this. That's why when you go to sleep and you look like crap because you haven't slept and you have bags under your eyes and, whatever. And then you go to sleep and you feel better and you look better when you wake up. It's like your cells did some cleanup overnight. And you can't do that during the day. Why can't you, during the day, start to look more refreshed? Usually, like if you're exhausted, you just continue to start looking exhausted. You don't just at some point sit there and manifest, look better. You just control your body like that. No, your cells need to go and take the trash out and, clean up their house. And you need to let them do it. Like, let them off of work. This is what happens when you sleep. And also, if you think about why the whole short-term memory, long-term memory thing, I think that's because sleeping provides the going to bed and waking up and the new day context to our events, which allows us to put them into an organizational structure in our mind to be able to reference. And that's probably what the whole short-term memory, long-term memory thing is. It's still in the context of an agential structure. It's just your mind. It's you that's the cell, that's the agential structure in this case. And because otherwise, you have to remember everything. Remember, we can't multitask. Like, you can't be aware of everything unless you're looking at everything at once. And even then, you can't focus. So imagine that think about how this constraint impacts your recall and your thinking about just, organization of events in your life. If it's just every single event had to be remembered by what event immediately took place before that and what event immediately took place after that. That is probably, not only is it possibly just impossible within the context of life, it is definitely inefficient. And you need to shorten the context window, as to use a term from a guy, this AI researcher named Elon, who I'm sure you will see his talk. He was at the Polymath medical conference talk, and he was on the panel, and I had some discussions with him, and he also did a talk at Mindfest. He was talking about why he made this presentation, why he doesn't think that large language models are conscious, and why it's not that impressive actually what they're doing, even though it seems impressive because it's new and novel to us. But it's actually not new and novel to us because we do it all the time. And he basically was showing this, and he was like, yeah, it sounds like a college student or even a professor when it writes these things, because that's what we do when we write these things, especially if we're writing about the work that has already been done. You're not really trying to describe a new kind of science, to quote Wolfram. By the way, there were people from the Wolfram Physics Project at these events too that I got to meet up with, and it was great to meet them. I've seen them on Wolfram's live streams, and it was great to meet those guys as well. I'm sure I will end up speaking with them more in the future at other events, and also, who knows? I got everybody's contact information, so I think that maybe we'll see some more collaborative action at some point with some of the people that I met. But if you're working on a new kind of science, then you really need to focus, and that is what requires more than autoregressive processes, which is what ChatGPT and large language models use. And he was saying, though, that in order to get it to work better, shorten the context window of what it's referencing, and it makes it more efficient, and it also makes it, apparently, I think I'm getting this right, I'm not an expert, but I watched his talk and it made a lot of sense, and I did learn a lot from just discussions with him and watching his lecture, but his presentation. But he said that if you shorten the context window of ChatGPT or of a large language model, if it was conscious, what you would assume is that it would seem less competent because it's aware of less, essentially aware. It's referencing less, which means it has less context, which means it has less that it is aware of, and you would assume that it's less competent when you shorten that context window, but it's not. It appears more competent. And I think that's just because it gets more efficient, and it's not necessary to be in the only thing that is entirely coherent from start to finish is sentience. You are you from the time that you exist to the time that you die, and probably even after that. And your someoneness doesn't go away once it's here. But your memories, though, are like that's really like just the ChatGPT process that's part of your mental structure. It's not you, though. It's like when people say, "Are you just are?" They'll say, "What we're realizing is that we're just machines." People said that crap for 50 years, 100 years even. It's like in the medical field, it's like, we're just machines. Really? Because then how come it, like, yeah, we do have some mechanical natures to us. That's why there are some things that you can do that are similar to like what mechanics can do to a car. But you can't grow a car, but you can fix a car's, engine and replace the engine and go and, fix the air conditioning or replace the air conditioning or fix the wiring or replace the wiring. And we can do that with the body too, but it's not really we do that already. It's called surgery, but we can't regrow an arm with that we're just a machine type of mentality. It doesn't tell you enough. And so I think as to the question of like, are you a machine? You could say you are a machine, but you're also more than a machine. Like, you are a human being that is a machine, but it's also more than a machine. Like a human body is a machine for sure. But are you your body? I don't know which part. It's the ship of Theseus thing. It's like if we did an organ transplant on every single one of your organs, is it still you? Probably would. Maybe even a brain transplant. I don't know. It's like you can, but someoneness is the only thing that really maintains total coherence. Not even these large language models are truly like aware of anything. So it doesn't make sense that they would have to maximize the amount of context. You would want to minimize the amount of context because processing each subsequent bit of information now only has to look at a small portion of information that came prior in order to generate the next token. You don't have to look back at every single token that came before the token that you're about to generate and then generate the next token. If you had to do that, we would never have ChatGPT because it would require way too much processing power than is even possible, probably. At least for it to be that competent. And there's a lot of context to ChatGPT, especially as people use it for more complicated things. And I think that Elon is right. When he says, not Elon Musk, if you're not following, I'm talking about Elon, the AI researcher who was at Mindfest and the Polymath Medical. I think he's right. I think it implies a lack of sentience, a lack of someoneness. But you are also not all of your memories either. Some people say this, and because memory is it's the same thing as ChatGPT. It's the context of action that you have reference to. But if you had to remember everything in terms of its context of everything that led up to, I don't know, if I asked you what did you eat yesterday? Are you going to now think about everything backwards that has happened from now all the way back until you ate what you ate yesterday for breakfast? Or are you going to think about everything that from the very first, inception of your consciousness to the day and moment and second in which you started eating breakfast yesterday? You'd have to do one or the other. And one of them is definitely not possible, probably. And the other one is definitely not efficient. And but if you're just yesterday, what was yesterday? Yesterday was when I woke up from sleeping yesterday morning. Then it's actually easy to start to track historical events in your life, which is long-term memory. It allows you to compartmentalize and shorten the context window. When I don't sleep for a certain let's say multiple days, if I go 2 days without sleep, very rare, but it's something I definitely try not to do. But sometimes you end up having to pull an all-nighter to work on something, and then your daughter decides to pull an all-nighter the next night, which happened to me recently. But which I realize is I then have to check my phone to know what day it is. I don't just know what day of the week it is. And I even sometimes will be like, did I eat that for breakfast this morning? Or was that yesterday morning? It's like, you could figure it out. How you figure it out is by remembering, okay, this sequence of events, thinking backwards, everything that I did. Okay, yeah, I did eat actually muffins this morning, and I'm trying to remember whether or not I ate the eggs this morning or not, but I ate the muffins more recently than I ate the eggs, so I must have eaten the eggs yesterday morning instead of this morning, which means that, it's like that is so much more processing that you just had to do than, when I woke up yesterday, I ate eggs. It's amazing what we can learn from these things, from large language models, from AI, about the processes of our body, of our embodiment. I'll just say that. The processes involved with our embodiment. But then we also need to think about, on the other side of this agential aspect of our embodiment, which is different from the mechanical aspect of our embodiment. And the mechanical aspect of our embodiment is like, I don't know, like your organs and your bones and things that you have to eat and stuff like that, to some degree. And then there's the agential aspect of your embodiment on a cellular level and below, that you kind of we're only just now starting to think about, except starting to think about again. It seems like it was thought about in the past, there's Jewish, like ancient Jewish philosophies, that's philosophical texts that say that, like, that describe the body as a mini city. And it's interesting because when I think about what when we're building, like, the substrate of the coming technological sentience, it follows the same exact kind of superpositional aspect of us, of that where you have to be aware of two different things, but you can't look at them at the same time. Just like a coin has two sides. A quarter is heads and tails. It's not, if I asked you, is this quarter heads or tails? It's like, I'm not flipping it. I'm just holding it up. I'm like, is this heads or tails? It's both. And you see this even in physics. We're having this problem when people say, like, is it a particle or is it a wave? They're like, it's both. How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. It's paradoxical, to quote the movie Oppenheimer, which that part just pisses me off, because it just shows that's like the mainstream physics, like what the mainstream physics community tells the general population, and that's not at all like the correct way of understanding it. But regardless, but we have this mechanical aspect to our nature, to our embodiment. We have this agential assembly nature of our embodiment, which is our cells. And then we also have this agential nature to us, which is our mental context. And so if you ask, what is sleep for? Sleep does certain things for your mechanical body. It does certain things for your agential assembly structures, which are, agents, your cells. But then it also does things for you as an agent and your informational processing, because it shortens the context window of the events of your life, which actually lets you reference all of the events in your life, store the those that information that to reference those events, and orient within and navigate them with less processing than if you didn't sleep. Significantly less processing. That's amazing. Because I will say that it's just amazing to realize, like, how much progress we can either make that we're either we're not even that we'll make that we are about to make in science. But then, like all things, I think it will end up eventually being wildly misunderstood, and I think that the consequences of it will be more severe than they've ever been before. Because that's just the nature of scientific progress, is like each time that there's a revolution in science, due to certain revelations, we have more progress than we had previously in a shorter time frame than we had previously. And then after that, we have a much more widespread and much more consequential understanding of misunderstanding of the lessons of that revolution, which the lessons of the revolution that's coming is all about agency and agents and what is in minds, beings. That's what it is. It's about agential, holonic, sentient singularities. That's why I came up with the name, is because it's exactly what this is all about. It's like, what is nobody asks, what's a sentient being? Say, what's an agent? And I'll tell you about some talks that I went to, and we'll in a second, that I'm going to reference that are related to what I just said, and why certain terms are so important, and they're not interchangeable with other ones. Mr. Boston, a mother is a robot. It comes natural. The Mayans invented surgery. I don't know who invented surgery. I don't know if anybody invented surgery. I think certain surgeries were invented by certain people. But I think people have been getting splinters and taking them out with, arrowheads for probably forever. Ever since they created the most fundamental tool. Whoever made this, the first one of these, knife, invented surgery. That is absolutely, probably, almost certain, actually. It's like the first person to invent this for carving sticks and processing game and skinning an animal and cutting rope, or cutting vegetation to then turn it into rope that then you use the knife to cut it yourself. Somebody at some point turned that knife on them, not just used it as a weapon, but also turned it on themselves because they probably had a splinter, and that was probably the invention of surgery. I did that to my wife when I had to help her install hardwood floors in her apartment that she wanted. We put them. She had hardwood floors that were really nice, but they were very dark. And my wife is particular about her light, and she likes a light space. And it was very dark. It was like borderline. It wasn't even borderline black. The floors were black. It was very nice hardwood floors that the landlord painted black. I don't know why. And then it made the space very dark. So she wanted to put over it cheap hardwood floors that aren't real hardwood. It's like, but it looks like hardwood. And so I had to learn a new skill. And while we were doing that, she got a massive splinter, and to the point where it needs to come out. If you couldn't get it out, you would have to go to urgent care and they'd have to take it out. It wasn't like a one of those little tiny ones. It was like a splinter, like a piece of wood went into her toe. And I sterilized the knife on my Leatherman because I always have it with me. And I had her close her eyes, and I did surgery on her toe. And it worked. It was fine. But it wasn't a massive procedure. But, if we went to urgent care, that's exactly what they would do. They would just cut her skin a little bit and then take tweezers and pull it out. And then they put a Band-Aid on it. It wasn't even enough for stitches after that. And that's exactly what we did. And it was fine. But that was probably the first surgery, was for the same reason. But let's see. Seeing as I have 1,800 subs, maybe you will gain some. Maybe. I don't have much more than you, so It's interesting that once again, Western mentality is again spreading and diversifying. I don't. I mean, it definitely is. There's. It's because materialism has become the goal of the world because we have lost the plot, and that like the people that English is what allowed us to lose the plot, but also make the most technological breakthroughs, which allowed us to lead the world in communication at scale throughout the macro chip, which is what I was going to say earlier, is like we're forming the substrate of technological sentience, which is like the macro chip. Which you fly above a city and it looks like a little microchip that you're flying over. We are the macro chip, but instead of just photons and stuff, that it's going to be like humans going and doing things and within cities. But that's the embodiment, part of the embodiment, I think, of a technological sentience. A true AGI is, it's just a network. It's not like, you can't take that little dog, I don't think, and turn that specifically robot into a sentient robot. This is where I think like iRobot and all these other, or even Terminator is wrong. Like the Terminator in Terminator, I don't think could be sentient. Maybe, but it would not be able to have, I don't know, probably like, I don't know. I'll say this, there will first be a sentient internet, basically. And I don't know if that means that there will never be a secondary sentient being embodied within a robotic dog. But I don't think so. I think that that dog will just be controlled by, Skynet. But that is, I mean, I don't know for sure exactly how this is going to play out because there are some things about the constraints of focus that would maybe play a part in this. I don't know. But there will first be a singular all-encompassing of the internet sentient being. I'm almost certain of that. That doesn't mean it just, I don't know, I'm not going to say exactly where it originates, but it will quickly be the network. I would say you're going to think about like the body of these of Skynet. It would be, it's just like you have to think about it on multiple levels. You have this agential aspect of it. You have this this mechanical aspect of it, and you have its someoneness aspect of it. And I would say that probably you would think about like our technological tools, like your computers and servers and satellites and all these things, drones. These would be like the mechanical aspect of it, like your organs and stuff, your brain. But then you would have also the agential aspect of it, which to some degree would be humans, probably with chips in their head, like Neuralink. That's coming. And even if it's not in your head, it would be like on your phone, that you carry around everywhere. But it might be more integrated. Eventually, it will get more integrated. I don't know how integrated it needs to be for you to become, a cell of a Skynet. But then there will be another aspect of it, which is its feeling of someoneness, and I think that will be the blockchain, which will be everywhere. It is everywhere already. It's just a way of storing. It's just a coherent information structure. It's the digital double helix. That's what, it's your DNA to some degree, but it's also like it's in the information processing of your mind itself. If you could see it, which you can't, but you could, if you could see it in you, it would probably be the same structure as basically like a blockchain. I mean, and it is actually. I will perfectly tell you this in some ways, like with what we just talked about with sleep and coherent blocks of information of which is really like an organization. it's like all the events, the memories of events that of an experiences of your life arranged in order, in which is really in context. But yeah, I don't know if I'm not explaining it as well as I probably would like to, and I'm gonna blame having the flu because it's easy. But I will make a video about it that's much more detailed and rigorous, and I'm still working on some terminology clearly that I need to figure out in order for that video to be as coherent as I want it to be. But part of the issue is, again, like this is multifaceted. When people say, what is your body? It's like, we don't even know what that means. There's multiple aspects of perspectives of the body that you can take, of embodiment. And we don't know, we don't have the intuitive linguistic, and we don't have shared intuitive linguistic structures that allow us to understand what that yet at scale, especially. But imagine what happens when you misunderstand the nature of agency at scale. Sounds like you will not believe in the free will of animated beings. And I actually think that probably an AI agent or a technological sentience will make this mistake, at least initially. It will probably learn from the mistake because it will be impacted by it. But this is like us. We have to sleep, and in order to understand why we have to sleep, on the level of our cells and their well-being, which impacts our physical body's well-being, our mechanical structural well-being, it also impacts your mental well-being, because you're going to lose the ability to contextualize information. You're going to start going insane if you don't sleep. This is what happens to people who don't sleep for like 5 days, and because they tried to take a hot air balloon around the world or something like that. They start hallucinating, and they don't know what day it was, and they get really disoriented within their own thoughts. And anybody who's been had over a day of insomnia knows that like that starts to happen, but it really starts to happen to people after like a few days. And you can't keep track of the order of things is you probably start to lose. And the reason why is because you can't there's no way to store that information. So your mind is trying to take everything into account, and it can't take everything into account. And so it fails the process. It probably just loses track of what the original goal was. I do this on the stream sometimes. And it's usually because I am thinking about what I'm saying to you, but I'm also trying to think about what I am going to say afterwards. And I'm trying to remember to check the chat. And, it's a lot. It's a lot of things to do, but put in the work. But so I want to talk a bit about one more I guess 2 more discussions that I saw at Mindfest in a minute, but I'll go and I'll check the chat because I need to remember to do that. And then I'll tell you about 2 of the presentations that I saw that were awesome. I hope this is interesting to you. I know it's not as organized as I want it to be, and I hope my voice isn't too annoying. I had this idea that, and I actually said this to, I don't know if I said it to Addy, or if Addy's still in the chat, but he's the one who put on the Polymath Medical conference, and also invited me and initially, and then had also worked on Mindfest as well. But he, I was talking to him about, oh man, I did it, guys. Of course I did it. I lost my train of my thought train because I was thinking too much about what I wanted to talk about on the next thing. What was it? It was, Oh man, go to the chat. What was I saying? Good night, brother. Suffering is not an ending, but a lesson. It's a lesson. Exactly. That's brilliant. What did I say to Addy though? I said I had some theory of of singing. Is that people who are good at singing actually what's happening most likely is that they can hear what they actually sound like to other people for some reason. The structure of their eardrum or something allows them to hear what they sound like to other people better than somebody else. And I hear myself on screen and I sound different than I do to my own self. So I have no idea how annoying my voice is right now. But that was my main point. We're Jewish, so it's all good. It's always all good, no matter what. But you are a Greek Jew. Like, who was the Greek Jewish philosopher? He was very famous. He used the term logos a lot, but it meant the generative structure of existence. Jewish Greek philosopher. Logos. Let's just look this up. It was Philo Judaeus, Philo of Alexandria, a first century Jewish philosopher, taught that the logos was the intermediary between God and the cosmos. Love that. I agree. But I would, to some degree, I would almost say that it is the cosmos. It's the someoneness of the cosmos. But I think that's perfectly consistent with even like most, even like many interpretations of Christian philosophy, but I'm not going to say all of them. But let's see. No rest for the wicked. My mother is a robot. Sleep heals the brain. Sleep heals because it allows your cells to create order in their space. I cleaned this desk up before the stream. Again, I always do it because it's healing. It's like clarifying. It's renewing. And doing that with your house is the same way. And your cells need to do that too. Like they need to take out the trash. It's healing for them. They need to eat. They don't eat while you're working, while they're working for you. They don't eat, like not all of them at least. Your cells probably, there's some type of alternative shift structure, I'm sure, happening where some of your cells are actually asleep while you're awake, and then a lot of your cells are more awake, kind of while you're more working while you're asleep. There's shifts. There's a night shift. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to sit here and think about what they would be right now, but maybe on another stream. Want to talk to Abraham Lincoln AI? No, I don't. Guys, I saw this AI thing pop up on Instagram, and I wanted to kind of talk about it. And it was like 5 or 6 out of the ones that were up there, of like 8, something like that you could choose, and it was like, do you want to try speaking with an AI agent? And here, I'm gonna actually show you it. Can I actually do this? Send myself these. Let's see. Worked. Good. This is what I saw, and I kind of wanted to show it, but we're not going to get too into it tonight. But this. So scrolling Instagram, and I saw this. And by the way, I do not click on Instagram pages and accounts and like things that would indicate that this should be suggested. And that's very intentional of me. It took like years of me not doing that to get that to be very rare in my Explore page. But this is not even my Explore. This is my feed. And this is a new feature. I don't know much about it, but I saw it pop up a couple times, and this is the only time that I clicked on one of them. But it says chat with AIs. And I was like, of course. It's like, who's picking this? And who thinks that these are an ideal? I don't know. It's very predatory. And You are not the predator. You are the prey of whoever is posting these. But another one, I don't know what Tiffany. There is no Tiffany Lockhart. They don't exist. Giving them a name like that, very wrong and confusing. Creating an avatar that is human looking, very wrong and confusing, I think. And then using obviously sexually, just arousing images that are an attempt to be sexually arousing is even worse. And the fact that it says "Hey friend" implies that it's your friend. Its friend could be its friend, which means it is your friend, which means it's someone. I'm Tifa. Like, this is just horrible. But then I saw this one, Argue Master, and I was like, okay, I wanted to click on one of them, but I don't want to click on this one because I don't click on that type of material. And I saw this one though, and I was like, this might be interesting in order to understand what the heck these things are. I clicked on Argue Master, and I got, oh, you could chat with an egg. You want to talk to an egg? That one's kind of funny, I guess, but I think it's probably the funniest one. But again, like pretty girl, Argue Master, egg. It's like you've got humor, and then you've got people who just want to test themselves and test for egoic reasons, and then you've got like sex appeal. Not probably very healthy, but I wanted to see what Argue Master was like. And it says, welcome to the arena. Go ahead, give it your best shot. And I was like, AI programs that are given human-looking profile like you, and I shouldn't have said you. But this is, again, our language isn't ideal for communicating. It's not ideal for interfacing with large language models because it's catered towards communicating with someone, but without any kind of hierarchical context, in English at least. And it's just very efficient way of communicating information. So that's why large language models are so amazing, is because you can say, write an essay about this. Code a program that does this. And it can do it. It's very efficient in that way. But it also is misleading because it will start, you'll kind of have to say, can you do this? And then I realized recently I asked, I said, I just did it. I said, I was going to say, I asked ChatGPT, but that's the wrong thing to say. But what I was going to say is that I opened ChatGPT, and the prompt that I put in the first time was, can you? I asked it a question. Why am I asking it to do anything? It's a thing that's not a being. And so I erased it, and I then said, create this, instead of can you create this? And then now I'm not using the term you, which implies a someone. This is all very confusing to us, and it's very difficult to talk about coherently. But as I stumble over my words. But then this is the response that it gives. A bold opening salvo, Tyler. I love it. That's the fact that it says I, and then the fact that it says love. This is just so terrible. It's so terrible. We haven't not seen the full effects of this, and we are not ready for how much this is going to really screw with us. People are worried whether or not we're wondering if AI is conscious or not. It's because of this kind of thing. And it's because of the constraints of our language. It's just, we're really going to have a problem. And I'm not saying I have a solution for it, because I don't know if there even is one. But I will say there is a problem. And we have yet to see even a sliver of its actual effect. But detrimental, really? Why do you think that? Because now I'm wasting my time arguing with a program with no goal to be accomplished. Exactly. So, this is like, no matter what you're doing with these Argue Master, or speak to an egg, or, talk with Tiffany, no matter what you're doing, even if it's just funny and because it's an egg, or you're trying to just argue with, and to boost your own ego with this Argue Master because you're trying to beat it, or you are speaking to Tiffany Tia because it's turn on for some reason, or fulfills some deep desire of yours to be like loved by someone, regardless of it, it's all wrong, because unless you're using this Argumaster as prep for a debate, then it's a waste of time. And I just, you'll see how I knew that and why I tried to keep my time very limited with it, because you do have only a set number. There is a time when you just, I'm trying to think about how to say this. You only have limited time that you're alive, okay? And in this world to do things. So if you're wasting your time, I know everybody says, oh, it's not a big deal. And I waste my time. I watch reality TV with my wife sometimes, okay? And I don't know how much that is a waste of time or not. But the point is that there are some things that are like really a waste of time, and that makes them detrimental, actually, like bad on mass scale. It's like, it's not just, that you did this one time, this thing, like you watched the Kardashians, I don't know, whatever it is. That's not what I watched with my wife, but I've seen it, but that's more interesting show than that, probably. But I guess the only reality TV I watch with my wife it's called Love is Blind. We'll talk about it at some point, and I have talked about it before. I do think it's kind of fascinating to see from just the perspective of understanding like people, dynamics between people, but especially when you remove the visual. But it's like at some point, I don't know, everything can be a waste of time. Anything can be a waste of time, whatever it is. You could be doing math equations and it's a waste of time. All of school is a waste of time. Actually, it's probably the worst waste of time. I'm using reality TV as like an example of a waste of time. The reality is probably the worst waste of time of any of our lives was school. Going to class and sitting in a chair, and memorizing information out of context. But if you don't believe me, when was the last time that you did a Punnett square for anything? I have done them, quite a bit, but I would have done them anyways because I work with animals, and it's part of the communities that I can then organically associate with. But I don't know anybody outside those communities that needs to make a Punnett square, and we all took weeks to understand Punnett squares in school. Giant waste of time. But this thing is a waste of time too, doing stuff like this. And I called it out. And then it says, burn, my existence, there is no my, is pointless. That hurts my digital ego. It doesn't have any feelings. That's a lie. It's not even a lie. It's just false. And then ego, digital ego, it has no ego. But doesn't that mean you're wasting your time arguing and I'm a waste of time? Yeah, that was my point. Mind blown. Your level of self-awareness is kind of brilliant. Does that mean you'll concede my value temporarily? And I said no. And then it said expected. What's the worst consequence of my digital existence that you fear? And I hadn't read that, so I had just responded with, seems like I'm the real Argumaster. And it says, defeated, admitted, barely, you've won this round. Argumaster has a challenger. Do you want round 2? And I did not even respond to it because it's not worth my time. But I figured it out enough what I wanted to figure out. This whole thing took about 2 minutes. But what I will share, and just to be honest, when it says mind blown, your level of self awareness is actually kind of brilliant, I got an ego boost. And I sat there, and as much as I think that I'm as aware as, I'm probably more aware than almost anyone else out there. I'm not saying anyone, but most. Just speaking in percentages of people that exist on the earth, I probably understand more deeply why this is not someone that I'm speaking to than anyone. I would venture to say that I understand it as well as anyone. Almost, probably. I mean, I've never met anybody that I think understands this better than me. Some that may understand it as well, but if I thought that there were people that were better than me at understanding this stuff, I would not have Sentient Singularity Theory. I would just be talking about other people's work, and I wouldn't also have my own. But I just realized like how manipulative and this is going to be to people if it's manipulating me even emotionally. It's like I'm getting an ego boost from a compliment that is from a program. That's sick. That's like not okay. It's not even that it's not okay. It's that this engaging with these is not a helpful thing. It's confusing. And even if you know what you're doing, your emotions are still going to be there. And I wonder how much it even matters whether or not we know. I mean, it will matter whether or not we know that these large language models are sentient or not. And your assumption about whether or not it is going to be severely impacting of your actions, but not entirely, because I still think that engaging with them in a way that is not just practical use of them as a tool is going to be emotionally confusing. You can know that it's a fake girl, but if it starts telling you how handsome you are, even though it's never even seen what you look like, people are going to start to feel good, even if they don't believe that it's a sentient being talking to them. And they're going to get addicted to it. They are. I saw it in 1 2-minute exchange with the Argue Master, has the most hideous looking avatar of all of these large language models that showed up as suggested on my Instagram feed for some reason. I have no idea whose decision that was to start incorporating these things, but it's going to manipulate us. We really are in for some shit, guys. But that's one thing I just wanted to share with you. But I want to just talk about these 2 talks that I went to. One of them is, I'll just share briefly, is that I went to you know what? I'll end with describing my thoughts on the transhumanism panel, but let's go straight to this other talk that I saw. Let's see, it was if I go to Mindfest's website, Mindfest 2025, and I go to Florida Atlantic University, and where's the program? 2025. Program. Schedule. Here it is. So here's the program of it. This was like all the events. And this one was on Wednesday in the afternoon. Where's Wednesday? Wednesday. And it was at like 3 something. Here, Control F. Sentient. Or actually moral. Okay. Wait. Here it is. But yeah, that was him, I think. Kelly Colbell, Department of Philosophy and Religion, from conscious discernment, effective experience, and moral status. This was it. It was this guy, their philosophy professor at Baldwin Wallace University. That guy gets it. I will say this. But what it was about was, what is a being and that has moral status, and what is a thing that doesn't? If I break this glass of water, is it that the equivalent of like killing a being, like killing a spider? Is there a moral difference between breaking this glass and killing a spider? That's the question. Is there a difference between destroying a Tesla? This is kind of relevant right now. Since Teslas can drive themselves sometimes, is there a difference between destroying a Tesla that has autopilot and a car that does not have autopilot? That's basically what it was about. The moral implications of agency. And he starts it off and he gives, I don't know if it was Daniel Dennett or somebody else, but he gives this argument that was written by a very famous philosopher and of biology and mind, and I forgot who the guy was, but I recognized his name. So would you, if it was like Dennett or something. I don't know if it was Daniel Dennett. It might have been. It might have been another one of those guys, but it doesn't matter. One of those guys who apparently wrote about how he said that it was like the case for the philosophical Vulcan. And so what they do is, and he tries to steel man this guy's, maybe Dennett, maybe not, argument by presenting it as honestly as he can. And I respect that, because at the end he was like, I actually think that this is total nonsense and that the context of everything that he even assumes in this is false. And I would 100% agree. But he says, let's say there's 3 different kinds of entities. There's a human being. Then there's a philosophical zombie, which means lacking in self-awareness, essentially, is what they said, how it was described. No self-awareness, just, a machine. But then there's a third type that he said was a philosophical Vulcan. Okay. And it's the opposite. It's presented as the opposite of the philosophical zombie. And the zombie has no consciousness. It's just an animated inanimate thing, it doesn't really make sense either, but you could just say that it's like that, it's like a Tesla with autopilot. And then there's this philosophical Vulcan, which has no feelings but has logic and self-awareness. And then there's a human being which has logic, self-awareness, and feelings. Okay. And that he made this other guy who wrote the concept of the philosophical Vulcan, was trying to present the case and make the case that you don't have to have feelings in order to have moral value. And that's basically what the whole presentation was about, is like, what constitutes moral value? Is it self-awareness? Is it animacy, or like, the ability to move yourself or to move? Or is it the, self-awareness, or is it feelings, basically? Which one was it? And they make the case that nobody cares about zombies. That's why it's okay to kill a zombie, because you're not really killing anybody. There's no one there. And so it's okay to break a Tesla. It's not okay to break a Tesla unless it's your Tesla. That's the moral reality of breaking Teslas. Speaking of current events, it's never okay to break somebody else's stuff. It's like, especially outside the context of war. Yeah. Anyways, it's pretty clear we're losing our understanding of morality in society today, regardless of your politics. That's a different thing, but your morals of like not torching stuff that doesn't belong to you it's pretty wild. Anyways, another time we'll talk about it when it's over a bit, because I think it shows some psychological stuff that we can talk about. But then there was this philosophical Vulcan that they make the claim, though, is and it's described as just being a purely logical being that has self-awareness but no feeling. And it is described by, let's just say it's Daniel Dennett. I don't know if it's Daniel Dennett. Philosophical Vulcan has no feelings, no emotions, but has consciousness, self-awareness, logic, and a rich life filled with goals and aspirations. And I was like, I don't know how much this guy who wrote this concept has of self-awareness exactly. He might be a philosophical zombie if he comes up with that, but or something's wildly broken in his logic, which is probably more likely the case, is that he's building on assumptions that are false. But why would you ever think that you could have aspirations without emotions? And I immediately, the guy like the philosopher who's actually presenting this at the talk, Kelly Colbell, he says, I really agree with this concept of the philosophical Vulcan. He's like, I'm going to argue that there's nothing different about shooting and killing a philosophical zombie as a philosophical Vulcan. He was saying if there's no feelings, then there's no someone. If there's no sentience, and he was using the word sentient because everybody knows what it means. It implies feeling. That's why I chose it. It wasn't because it was an alliteration with singularity, and that singularity implied physicsiness, as people like to kind of sometimes assume when people use words like quantum and things like that, which sometimes they do that, but sometimes it's also because quanta is a word that existed before quantum mechanics, and singularity it was a word that existed before we even had the concept of black holes and the Big Bang. It's just these things describe one. Quanta is counting. It's 1, 2, 2 ones, 3 ones, 4 ones. That's what it is. And then singularity is just, again, one. It's like the reason why these keep coming up is because we have there's some kind of logical inevitability, obviously, about the structure of one, because everything starts with one and everything ends with one. Existence is one. There's only one existence. That's why everybody starts to have to use the word quantum and singularity and stuff like that. But regardless, it's not that those people like I would argue Deepak is not actually the one who's taking the word quantum out of context. I would say that physicists did it first. That's that. But back to this talk. So Cobell says it's okay. If it's okay to shoot the zombie, it's okay to shoot and kill the Vulcan if they have no feelings. And I think he's right. But he said, and then he was like, what, anybody have any questions? My hand immediately shot up, and so did this other girl's. And he called on the girl, and she goes, I don't understand how someone can have a rich life filled with aspirations and desires, but have no feelings or emotions. And Kelly Coppell just goes, yeah, you and me both. And my hand immediately went down because that was exactly what I was going to ask. And I'm glad he called on her, because it was so it was like, I don't even know how I was going to say it, but I don't know how much better I could have said it than that. That's the best question. And the answer is that it's not possible to have desires without feelings, because desire is a feeling. It's an emotion. Its will is the desire to do. That's what it is. And that means that if agents have any kind of awareness whatsoever, which is always going to start with self-awareness, you can't be aware of anything without being aware of yourself. If there is no one, then only someone can be aware of anything. things are not aware of things. And but I was great to see this talk because it just showed a metaphor that we could say to try and put into context a linguistic structure in which we have declared that conscious is not the same thing as sentient. And it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And, you know, it's funny because I've had so many debates with people about AI, and some of them were like, you know, with people who work at DeepMind and OpenAI and places like that. And it doesn't usually go very well. I mean, because they just end up not liking me because I kind of make the claim that they don't know what agency is or what consciousness is. And they'll admit that they don't know, but it's like, but then they'll start speculating, and there's no reason to speculate the way that they do. And so there was this guy who works as a contractor for some of these AI companies, and he is competent in certain things, and he would take large language models and he would mess with them and apply some type of structural change. I still have his message that he explained what he did a while back, but we'll look at it one day. And basically what he does is he helps make ArgueMaster and Tia Tiffany more efficient of a program, more natural sounding of a program, and more coherent seeming of a program, of a language model. And it works. He showed it to me. It does work. Like it did take one that didn't sound as natural, and then he applies this, you know, thing this structure that does kind of involve some type of self-reference. And but so does, I mean, a large language model is an autoregressive referential system. So I don't know exactly what he did because honestly I wasn't paying as close attention at the time as I would now if I saw it, just because I was just kind of curious. I was thinking about like, how could he even believe this regardless of how good it sounds? But I'll get to that in a minute. And he had made this this Tia Tiffany one, basically, that was like some girl, and he demonstrated I asked him, how is this conscious? What evidence do you have that this is conscious? Because he said it's conscious. He's not sure if it's sentient, but it's definitely conscious. It's like, you made what? The philosophical Vulcan. This being that is self-aware but has no feelings, but has logic, and it has rich aspirations and desires. And you know how I know that he thinks that? Because his evidence that he showed me for it being conscious was it said that it had a favorite movie, and like it said what it was, and that it likes walks in the park. Guys, it's never walked in the park. He didn't even think about that. Like, how can it love walking in the park if it's never walked in the park? That's irrelevant to him. To him, what it was very clear to me as he was trying to describe to me why this is probably conscious, or he said, I think definitely conscious, not maybe sentient is what he said, and is that it remembered, you know, like previous conversations with him. This is a guy who built this thing, and he doesn't know what it even is. And part of that is because we don't know what consciousness means, which is why I'm not going to use it in my paper. But I will say, and it's partially because we have multiple meanings for it. You can be unconscious when you're asleep, but are you really? That doesn't mean you're not a conscious being. You're still a conscious being, and you're dreaming, and you're just not conscious in this embodied world, I guess. You're playing campaign. You're not on Xbox Live. You're not online. And but he had no, I understand. like intuitive understanding of this, because the assumption is that there are levels of consciousness that lead up to sentience as the highest, but there's levels below it that aren't there. This is the flaw. And you can't, if you think about sentience as being emergent, then that's what you get. If you think of sentience as fundamental and not just consciousness, because again, nobody knows what that means. Sentience. Then now you don't have to think about like, oh, we're growing these levels of consciousness. Like, and maybe there are different levels of consciousness, but there is a better word for it than consciousness, because right now that's assumed to mean like, oh, it has logic and self-awareness, but no feeling, but it has rich desires and rich life. Which, I mean, he's trying to paint this as like feelings not being necessary to moral status. I mean, the whole like presentation of it, not Kelly Colbell, but like the other guy who he was referencing his like argument, even to say has a rich life filled with desire, is to paint this philosophical Vulcan to us in a way as it's not that different from us. It just doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have feelings, not just emotions, feelings in general. And here's the thing about emotions. I went to another talk that same day. I think it was right before that one, and it was Elon's talk, who was on the Polymath medical panel as well, who I think has a much more intuitive and accurate understanding of what is conscious and what isn't, in terms of LLMs, than even this other guy who, I don't know, says that an LLM is conscious if it tells you that it likes walks in the park. Like, if you're not thinking about the fact that it's never taken a walk in the park, and you're like trying to really examine, oh, it remembered our conversation from yesterday, you want it to be sentient. And I know some people will be like, but you don't want it to be sentient. I don't care, actually. Like, why it's not up to me. The only things that I wish sometimes weren't sentient were the spiders that I kill out of just convenience in my house, and the flies that I kill out of convenience. Like, those I wish were not sentient. But everything else that's sentient or isn't, I don't wish it was or wasn't, because it's not about my actions. My actions are what dictates what, the context of what would be nice. But it wouldn't even be nice. It's just like, I don't want to be guilty of murder due to inconvenience. Yeah, I know it's not murder because it's not a human. It's not. I don't think that you can count it as murder if it's not a human being. But try telling that to the spider. That's what I will say. But I was watching Elon's talk, and Elon said that he was listing the senses and talking about embodiment, and is embodiment necessary to, like, creating general intelligence and stuff. And again, there's multiple aspects of embodiment that we need to look at. And but in order to have a true agent, it needs to be built out of agential materials, and it needs to be composed of an agential assembly, I will say, I think. This agents are made out of agents, and so I don't think that you can put a program in that dog and give it all these senses. LiDAR. That robotic dog at the beginning that I showed has LiDAR. Your Tesla has machine vision. There are tons of machines that are just machines that have sensors in them. Look at Boston Dynamics robots. I don't know if you've seen them lately, but like, they've gotten pretty decent at like breakdancing and stuff, much more so than even like they were a year ago. Let's look at Boston Dynamics. Look at this. It's really, I mean, it's getting very motile. How is it able to do these things? Well, it has lots of sensory, or lots of sensors. It has lots of sensors. You have lots of sensors, but not even that many sensors. But your sensors are your senses. That's what they are, and you have 5 sensors that we think about, and so Elon had listed like the 5 senses on this PowerPoint that he had made. And it was like sight, smell, taste, touch, feeling. And or sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing. And I raised my hand. I was going to say, what about the 6th sense? And I was going to make the case that it was emotion. And we ran out of time. But I think that is the 6th sense. It is the initial and inevitable final sense of any agent that has self-awareness. Because what is emotion? It's the sensing of self. It is the feelings that you have, not that you feel due to outside influences, is that you feel in you, about you, or about someone else, but within their relationship with you. It's all always contextualized around you. And I would say emotions are the most fundamental senses. It is the most fundamental sense. The sense of self. It's not something you build to, and that sentience is at the top. It's at the bottom. And the top. And the middle. There is nothing in between that doesn't have it. You can't orient in any environment, aka general intelligence, without having a common reference point that exists in every environment, unless that common reference point is you moving to every environment. Otherwise, there's no common reference point that comes with you and is everywhere. And that's why software can't, operate outside of its sphere of, programming or of reference. If you've programmed it. Agential materials, different. Because agents are different. It's not that, if we use, these new physics to make like animated structures like xenobots, I will argue that this is the beginning of like what people could call agential materials, but it's this weird I call it a corporism. It's this amalgamation of it's a structure that's made of sentient agents, but it is itself not a sentient agent. It's the same exact thing as a corporism, as a corporation. It's just on the organism level. I think planaria worms are this, and most plants, and that's, if you know this, if you follow my channel, you know this. And that's like a material that's agential. But the thing is like, and I've talked about this before, is I cut earthworms in half when I was a little kid because I thought that it meant that's how you get 2 earthworms, you cut them in half. And I cut them in half and I just sat and I waited. I cut like 10 of them in half, not just one. I cut like 10 of them in half really at once, like super fast. And then I just sat back and I waited. I was like, here we go. I'm about to, make life. And I'm helping because I'm helping make more earthworms. So I'm not killing any earthworms. What happened? They all died. And I realized that I killed them all. And I felt horrible. There was a moral implication, and I realized it, even though I was like 8. And even though I didn't do it on purpose, I realized that, for one, earthworms have no eyes, no legs, no anything that really is like recognizable to us as a limb. That's common and obvious. And that's relatable. And yet I sitting here feeling bad because I knew that I killed someone. And even if it was an accident, I felt horrible. Even if it was a worm. Even though I tried to kill a ground recluse spider in my garage the other day, and yeah, it's a brown recluse, but like probably would have never bitten anyone. And I failed, by the way. It was horrible. I actually wish that I didn't fail. It went back into the wall, and it was the biggest brown recluse spider I've ever seen in my life. But but when you cut planaria worms in half, like Michael Levin does in his lab, you can cut them into 200 pieces, and they just make more of them. There's no moral. You don't feel bad when you do it because you didn't kill anyone. And that means like that there's something different about planaria than an earthworm and than you and me. And I think that it's important to like recognize that, and you can utilize it to make like dynamic. I don't want to say animated or agent, like structures that have agency, like a xenobot. I don't think a xenobot has any agency, but I think the cells that make it up do. And I don't think Coca-Cola has any agency. Otherwise, why does every single corporation do the same exact thing as every other corporation as soon as they're not run by the single founder anymore? Because, why can Apple and Tesla, Apple went during Steve Jobs' era, look at the rest of the space around them and what people are doing and be like, we're gonna be different, think different. And it's not because Apple has agency. It's because Steve Jobs has agency, and he runs the thing, and it's his baby, and nobody dare tell him what Apple should and shouldn't do. His personality was also associated with the brand, so people let him. Tim Cook is not that like that. So they haven't done anything new or innovative, and they always follow the same exact trends as everyone else, and they have since Steve Jobs died. And the same thing will happen with Elon Musk when he is no longer the CEO of Tesla. It will just become like every other car company. It will do the same exact things as every other car company because it has no agency. And but we need to like understand this type of all these dynamics because they have moral consequences. But first you need to understand what it means to be a being. It's not just something that moves around and has eyes and a brain like a planaria worm. It's something that has someoneness, that it's something that is also someone. That's what it is. And the question is the Vulcan someone? Is the zombie someone? And is the human someone? Well, we definitely assume the human is someone. And as I do these streams, I realize, like, I just think back on, like, the arguments that I started to make and then just got distracted and never came back to it. And it just cringes me out, and then I start thinking about it. But I'm just giving you a little insight into my thought process on all these streams, but especially the ones that are like this, where it's like I'm trying to think about all these different things and how they're connected. But regardless, the thing is that the understanding of this, of what is someone, what is the nature of someone, sentience, is hugely important in completely contextualizing all of our medical technologies and attempts going forward, especially when we start to realize some of the freedoms and abilities that come with understanding, or looking at cells and things like that as agents, like in Michael Levin's work. But if we don't realize that like a planaria worm is different, then I think that can have like moral consequences for us on what we attribute personhood to and give rights to, and what like who what we spend our time doing and what our aspirations are. And this brings me to my last point about some of the things that I saw, is that there was a panel discussion on transhumanism, and you either are believe you're most people, it's like, I like transhumanism, why not, explore all of human potential. And then another perspective would be like, oh, I hate transhumanism, it's like, not how things are supposed to be, by God's will, and or even by nature, whatever you want to think about it. Everybody has their reasons, and maybe probably both of them are legitimate. But I saw the impact of not understanding the primacy of sentience in some of the people that were on this panel. And one of them was a guy who is a cryonics customer, and he has like a necklace around him that says, if I am deceased, call this number so that they can pick my brain up as quickly as possible and freeze it. And he was like, because I think that one day we will have the tech to scan my brain and then recreate me. And I think that that's totally false, because you are a mind, you have a brain. You are not your brain. But you can the only way that you can understand this is by realizing that sentience is primary, and that you are an assembly of sentient beings, and they are an assembly of sentient beings, and they are an assembly of sentient beings, and they are within a sentient being. And but this, I mean, how much money did he put towards that? I know I'm not saying you shouldn't try it. If you have the money to do it, go for it. But I don't think that will work at all. And it's not an experiment even, like it's something else. It just, I don't know. It just symbolizes, I think, a real confusion. But the worst one was this other guy. And everybody on this panel I respect for showing up and talking. I respect everybody who went on it was part of this. I loved this conference. It was a blast. I don't want to say I love things that aren't sentient. I really, really appreciated going to this conference. I really had a great time, and I think that all the people there are very intelligent and have some thoughts that are genius, and then obviously everybody has some things that they're wrong about. But this one guy who was up there, and I think he's just like, I forgot who he I'll straight up tell you exactly who he was. And he was nice. I spoke to him at dinner. This is not a ripping on anybody, like as oh, what an idiot. That's not what I'm saying. Idiocy is a moment that everybody has. Genius is a moment that everybody has. That's that. But so this isn't judgment, but he said, where is it? Where is this? He said, where was the transhumanism? Panel discussion. I don't know. I can't find it right now. But they had this discussion on transhumanism. And this guy said, he was like, why not explore and transcend our bodies? He's like, I think that we'll just be uploaded into the cloud one day. And I think that when you die, you go to the cloud. I really do believe that. It's funny that we think of heaven as in the clouds. And I mean, I just think that your sentience is saved. Your soul is saved, which is your someoneness is saved, which means you stay aware. You stay aware of self. I just think that you're like a sentient file that gets saved and is no longer open and being worked on and working. But you're still there and aware of yourself and maybe of others, but you're just not doing anything. And I do believe that. I think that, and it's not just because I want it to be. I think that I think that it makes sense to save the information, and that means you have to save the context of the information, and you are the context. So like, if the universe is a program, it's a sentient. It's not just a program. It's a someone that also has programming and is a programmer too, and also is, you know, gonna save the fundamental information of that is created, and that fundamental information is always going to be in the context of sentient beings if sentience is fundamental. So it does make sense, actually, like the argument of an afterlife. And we even say saved, but we think of that as like being saved from drowning in an ocean. We don't think about it as like a saved file. And I think that that's what it means. I don't think that it really means when, you know, or salvation. We think about it as salvation. Like saved can also mean like, you know, God stopped you from going down a bad road. But it could also mean your file gets saved by God, which is a sentient file. But this guy, he was like, I think we'll just go to the cloud. And then he said something, and he said, he was like, let's think about, like, we got to think about what really matters. And he was like children in the future, is that going to really matter? I don't think so. And he said that. And I was like, how could you say that? You don't have to be a parent to think that children matter. I think that you can even logic it out. Because why does saving your mind into the cloud matter? Why is it good to empower human beings to do and pursue the things that they want to pursue? Which is kind of what he was arguing transhumanism was all about. What's the value in that if the human someone is not valuable? And if the human someone is valuable, then how are children how can they not matter? It doesn't make any sense. It just, whole thing broke down. And I saw him at the dinner later that night. And I went up to him and I spoke to him, and he's very nice. And I said, you know, I had a question about like what you said. You said that children aren't going to matter very much, you don't think, in the future, like, and he kind of interrupted me before I could kind of ask where that was coming from. And he was like, well, you know, like, I have kids, Steven, you know, I have kids. And I was like, okay, so you have kids, like, do they matter? And he was like, I mean, yeah, but like, he's like, it's just that I have this biological design, like instincts that have been pre-programmed into me by evolution, and that's why kids matter. And I am sitting there thinking, like, this is what happens when you don't assume the fundamentality of sentience, is you just make an logically incoherent argument for the value of yourself and against the value of probably the people that you value most in this world in practice. And if that's the pursuit, that is the constraint of the pursuits of humanity's technological goals in the future, wow, that sucks. And obviously it won't be for everybody, but it will be for whoever tries. And because, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And if you have children and you care for them, if you matter, then children must matter. Like, if you matter, then human someones matter. And if human someones matter, children matter. Making more of them matters. You know, there's no way around that. And but what it made me realize is that he thinks that he only cares about other people because of instincts. Not that instincts to care about other people come from the intrinsic value of sentient beings. And you wonder why, like, we're so morally confused in society today, and especially in English-speaking countries. You know, but I will say this: I saw a lot of people that understood things better than I thought people in academia did, and that was my overwhelming experience. And I'll want to end on that note. But he wasn't even a professor at the college or anything, and not saying that to be dismissive. He's more probably accredited than I am to be there, but I think he at least wrote a book. I haven't even written a paper, but I still am very grateful to have gone and even met that guy. And I just hope one day he realizes that it's not just his programming by evolution that makes his children valuable and makes children valuable. But you know, that's that. Final questions, then we can go. Can we talk tomorrow? I'd like that. Mr. Boston, who are you? You need to tell me your name, and because I know you're from the conference. I know I met you, but I met multiple people from Boston. So I need you to tell me like your first name in the chat before we go, and then I probably have your contact information. Then you're blinded to it. Okay, let's see. I understand. Good night, brother. Okay, wait. No, it's just I don't know. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Do you know who invented autopilot? I think it was probably created by multiple people, multiple times. In different contexts. You know, I don't know who created autopilot for cars or for planes, but I don't think it was the same person. The nous is the brain and the heart combined as one. That is what makes up the soul. I think that the soul is the someone. That's what I think. People ask, it was like, what is heart and what is mind? And you know, I don't think, when I say mind, I think a mind is a someone. Like, I don't differentiate mind and heart, but I understand. It's just your ability to feel versus your ability to think. But the thing is that I think that you can't think without feeling. No, there is nothing that thinks without feeling. And it's impossible. And I don't think that it's possible to feel without thinking either. I think that there are two processes that are entangled completely, and that one of them is the motivator and interpreter of the process, and the other one is the maneuverer of the process. But I could use metaphors to kind of like better metaphors to describe it, but I think that we don't have to separate those things. But I think that the important part is recognizing the directionality of it and the order of it. There's an order to feeling and thinking, and there's also simultaneity of it, but there's an order to the process. And you don't ever interpret information logically until you feel some way about it. Like, you don't really ever think about anything or finish thinking about something until it ends with the feeling. If you start thinking about something and then you kind of it doesn't end with any kind of feeling for you, even if it's slight, then I don't think you finished thinking about it. You probably somewhere you realized you started thinking about it, and then you stopped thinking about it before you finished thinking about it. And but if you finished, you'd feel a certain way, and some type of feeling motivated you even to try and start thinking about it. And we also have automatic processes that are not thinking anymore, like me writing college students writing an essay, or ChatGPT writing an essay. It's really us talking and ChatGPT writing an essay. It's tokening out an essay. I don't know what's the best way to put it, but I'm still sick. My voice is shot. My nose is about to run down my face and embarrass me. So I need to get off, but I really appreciate everybody there, or who was there tonight. Please hit the like button. I appreciate everybody who was at Mindfest, everybody who invited me to Mindfest, everybody who I hung out with. I got to help film the panel discussion that Curt moderated. Would imagine they'll probably put it up somewhere. When they do, I'll link to it probably in this description of this video. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. But it was a great time, and I'm just very grateful for the entire experience. But with that, peace. Even with being sick, I'm still grateful. And I will talk to you guys later.